I tried, Brent.
Call the meeting to order.
Thank you, Your Worship. Prior to calling for the adoption of minutes, I would ask if there's any other business items to be added.
You seeing none?
Oh, I have, sorry. Yeah. Mine was the Glen 50 Plus Society's concerns about parking and...
You want to discuss it?
Yep. Okay, anybody else?
I think Councillor Chowner was relating a terrible thing that happened last night that her family chipped in and fixed up.
Well, I emailed the RCMP about it.
So I think it's worthwhile letting the citizens know.
Okay.
Okay, so we're back to...
That's Charles Best Field.
Right? Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Charles Best Field. Nothing else? Mr. Clerk.
Thank you. The first item on the agenda is the minutes of this committee's meeting of Monday, June 1st. Recommendation to approve.
So moved. Second. Asmussen, Hodge, all in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 2 is our first delegation. It's the Hazel Drive Neighbours Association. I'm here to speak upon the citywide official community plan amendment application for the Hazel Drive area. I'd like to invite Mr. Anton Opsitman to come forward to speak.
Anton, come on forward. Just sit right here. I'll just let you know, my name's Richard. I'm the mayor, and normally it would be the acting mayor that would chair this, but because we have a semi-annual general meeting in a few minutes, item 4 is the annual report. I'll be chairing until then. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, my cohort is still trying to park.
Okay, we can set this aside for tomorrow.
I guess, does he sit here or back there?
He can sit with you if you like.
Yeah. All right.
Here we go. Welcome.
Thank you. As you see, I carry a big stick.
Now, as you agreed, it's 5 minutes. 5 minutes for your presentation.
Can start now. Your Worship, members of council, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. My name is Tony Opsitman, and this is Ed Wormsley, and we belong to the Hazel Drive Neighborhood Association. Other residents are sitting behind us. Our group is comprised of about 30 long-time residents, many of whom have been here up there for over 40 years, and we could call them Burke Mountain pioneers. We have come here today to ask Council for support for our long-standing OCP amendment. I'd like first to give you a short history of our amendment application. We applied for the OCP amendment in 1997, which was city procedure at that time. This was prior to the adoption of the Northeast Coquitlam Neighborhood Plan, NECAP, and the now established neighborhood plans for Burke Mountain. We proceeded to do the necessary study to further the application. Along the way, we were told to wait for the NECAP. This was delayed and finally passed, and we were disappointed to be classified as Phase 3. We were told to wait again, and there would be studies done for NECAP neighborhood plan process for Phase 1 and 2, and that would benefit us. So we waited. The two Hyde Creek plans, Smiling Creek and Partington, were all put in front of our small area, which comprises about, give or take, 100 acres. And so we reactivated our OCP amendment from 1997. In 2007, Council passed a motion to do a neighborhood plan for the Hazel area, commencing the next year, when Partington was slated to wrap up. This was based on that we put our OCP amendment aside, and so we did. After 6 years of waiting for next year, we came to Council in December 2013 and asked Council to leave us out of the visioning and support our outstanding OCP amendment. Council was sympathetic, called us the low-hanging branch, but asked us to wait for the first phase of visioning so planning could coordinate our small area with the balance of Burke Mountain development, which was estimated to be completed this spring, 2015. We have been patient to let the process play out and agreed to wait as Council asked us. Through the Northwest Burke Visioning, city staff have done a great job of completing the basic studies for that area. But the spring 2015 deadline has come and gone. In our opinion, we just have as much information as the plan needs for a similar application. Many of our residents are getting on in years, as you might see. A few have become ill and they aren't here. Many of who are Burke Mountain pioneers. So collectively as a group, we cannot afford to wait much longer. We need sanitary sewer. We have waited for years. As many septic systems are old and beginning to fail, we also want to finally resolve and realize our family legacies. We have been patient, but now we will move forward with our application. Please help us. This is what we're asking for here today, so I say thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. So, thank you very much.
We thank you for coming. We thank you for your patience. We recognize that this has been a long process, and the light doesn't seem to be there. So we understand the frustration.
Good things take time.
Indeed, they do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Where's my stick?
We didn't know whether you were angry, so we took your stick away.
Our second delegation, and third item on the agenda, is from Our Horizon. I'd like to invite Matt Hulse to come forward, who's here to speak about warning labels on gasoline nozzles.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Did I send forward a...
If you could just stand for a moment. With Council's indulgence, I wonder if Mr. McIntyre has any helpful information related to the process before the delegation leaves. No. Excuse me? We're just, Mr. McIntyre is actually going to respond a little bit to, or actually it sounds like are you going to be stepping out or are you going to be doing it from here? Let's have it from here. My apologies for doing this. There was a large group of people. They didn't ask a question, but let's give them at least some process. Because
apologize.
okay.
Thanks so much. Appreciate that. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Just very briefly, I've asked Steve Goley to join me as the acting manager in community planning. Steve is
You
project
could pull the microphone a little bit
So
closer.
they can hear you in the back.
There we go.
Steve is project managing the Northwest Burke Vision initiative right now. It is true.
Pointed at me. It's apparently very directional.
Is it on?
It's not even on.
It's not even
I
on.
don't think it's on.
No, you moved it. When you moved it, you just have to.
Oh, thank you, Jay.
Got to push the button.
There we go.
He's a planner, not an engineer.
Still vacation mode here. Sorry, Your Worship and Council. More seriously, it is correct. Initially, when the Northwest Burke project was brought forward to Council, the work program, we had targeted mid-2015 to be done. Once we got into the project, certainly in the early phase, the research and investigation took a lot longer, a lot more material there. There were subsequent reports back as we updated Council on the progress and the information that we were generating, that the target date for completion was slipping out there. That's also been shared with the public. I know it wasn't well received at our last public meeting, and I know the group is very anxious to proceed. There's a lot of frustration there. At this point, we're targeting by the end of 2015, early 2016 to be done. I have been talking with Steve about how we can shift some resources around, maybe bring additional resources to bear to get on and get this thing done, which we'd like to do. The other thing that struck me as well is we are at the point right now of working with the consultants and looking at things like the road network, like the sewage system that would be necessary to service those areas and some land use options. So maybe at some point very soon, Steve and I can contact Anton and sit down with him and again just get up to speed on where they'd like to go with some of their ideas, and so we can factor that into the process as well. So we don't want to lose touch with the group. We will certainly proceed as quickly as, but reasonably as possible, and if there's interest at council for us to throw some additional resources at that, we can get creative that way too.
Yeah, I think at this point we probably need to try to figure out how to meet the deadlines we established ourselves. We recognize the pressure that planning is facing from a whole bunch of fronts, and we've got lots and lots of areas of pressure. But this community group, this group of landowners has been very, very patient. And I remember when I first got on council, it was they were tired at that point. So let's. I've got Councillor O'Neill.
Yes, very quickly in terms of process. So this group has an outstanding OCP amendment application. What do you understand by their presentation today? That they want that application to go forward, and if that goes forward, is planning able to support that right now without having your overall plan complete for the area? Does that go forward and come to us regardless now of the big visioning process?
Thanks, Your Worship. Let me try to respond to that. If Steve wants to add on, he's welcome to as well. Yeah, what I heard was, Council, we're seeking your support to help advance our OCP amendment application that's been on the books for many, many years. That was in part one of my reactions and thought was to actually meet with that group again just to get up to speed, because my recollection is that OCP amendment application was pretty, well, dates from the mid-1900s, 1990s. It was a pretty conventional sort of suburban residential approach, and that may not be consistent with what the opportunities coming out of the vision would be. As well, there's a whole raft of issues and constraints and challenges, and I think the speaker touched on one of them, the extension of sewer to that area. So there's a lot that goes part and parcel with that would benefit by doing the vision to have that overall view. Again, I would like to meet with them to get a better sense of where they're at and where they'd like to go with it. If they insist on proceeding with an OCP amendment application, that is a property owner's right. That's their privilege to do that. Staff would look at that, and in time it would go forward to council with our recommendation. I can't predetermine that recommendation right now, but that would be the process. So, Steve, anything else further? Are you familiar with the lands and what the thinking might be?
Your Worship, Councillor O'Neill. The main reason why we were undertaking the vision was really that big picture planning perspective to the area, looking at access to lands beyond and utility servicing. That not only benefits these property owners, but it benefits the property owners upstream from these property owners. So we still see that having huge value. Where we are now is we reported back to Council at the beginning of March, and we last met with the property owners on April 11th. And that was to end our phase one, which was our constraints and opportunities analysis phase. We're now into phase two. We're now looking at access, servicing, and land use. And we'll be reporting back to council on that in the fall. And at that time, we'll be near the end of phase two, and we'll be in a much better position to talk about those early release lands from a utilities and transportation perspectives and land. And
Thank you. So even an OCP amendment doesn't move them to breaking ground on anything. It's because there's still a whole bunch of servicing. There's a bunch of other planning issues that have to be addressed. Councillor Reid.
Okay, so I've been around almost as long as you have. So my point on this is you will be having a meeting with these homeowners in the Hazel Drive area within the next few months to sort of just put the goalposts in. Is that correct?
Through the chair, thank you. Just to clarify, what I'd like to do is meet with them sooner than that, just to get, again, up to speed where they're at, what their aspirations are. And so as we move through the optioning phase, we'll have that benefit of that information. And then certainly, we would be meeting with that particular group of property owners along with the others that we've had several meetings with after we've given an update to council in the early fall.
Okay. Thank you. I think if we sort of promise stuff in the spring, if we can't deliver, I think we're going to have to start sending out notices that we can't deliver, especially when we have groups that have been waiting for so long. So that is a problem.
Absolutely. Okay. So we urge you to, you said you'll meet with them relatively soon. There's going to be a meeting relatively soon with the planning department. Let's figure out where we're at, and let's get this. I'd love to see this project move forward to some definitive resolution for you folks. Okay, thank you. And actually, planning isn't needed in this next item, so you could have a short conversation with planners while we hear this delegation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. How long do I have for this delegation?
5 minutes.
5 minutes. Okay. Thank you for having me here today. My name is Matt Hulse. I am the BC campaign director for Our Horizon. We are looking to put warning labels on gasoline nozzles, and if you'd like to pass these around as you go, you can go this way. Maybe you can go this way, perhaps. And take one and pass it to your neighbor. We would like to require or ask municipal councils to require warning labels on gasoline nozzles. They would depict climate change and air pollution negative consequences of the use of fossil fuels. So basically, climate change is happening. I can guess that we all would agree upon that, and humans are having a direct impact on the world as we know it by putting more fossil fuels into the atmosphere than the atmosphere can handle. We're at a tipping point in terms of the number of carbon parts million in our atmosphere, and political consensus has determined that we have about a 2-degree ceiling that we must stay under in order to keep our climate and globe relatively healthy. The amount of fossil fuels it will take to get us there is about 565 gigatons. We have much more than that in the ground, which means we have to keep it in the ground, which means, given present rates of fossil fuel use, we have about roughly 16 years of fossil fuel use at current rates to transition away from a carbon economy and onto some more greener solutions. So in this 16-year grace period, the transition period, we think we're going to need all the tools we can get to help us move away from cars and towards better transportation. This is one tool we think will help us get us there. And as you'll notice, I think, they look strikingly similar to tobacco labels. Tobacco labels were a Canadian innovation, certainly graphic image labels like this, which were introduced in 2001 and have now spread across globe and are available in about 60 different countries. We know they work. The first thing we know is from a number of studies and studies of studies that show that tobacco warning labels change attitudes and behavior in tobacco users. The second thing is tobacco companies fight these wherever they pop up around the world. If they didn't fight them, it would seem silly if they didn't actually work. Having just graduated from law school, one of our first constitutional law cases we study on freedom of expression is the RJR MacDonald, which is a battle against the government of Canada about these tobacco labels. Needless to say, the government of Canada won. The reason why we think these are compelling for climate change is for 3 reasons. The first of which is climate change is a problem of no feedback. We emit fossil fuel emissions today, and we don't see the effects until down the road, and perhaps not even in our own jurisdiction, our own locality. They will affect somebody else around the world. Canada is fortunately relatively immune from many of the negative consequences of fossil fuel use, though not all. People prefer interests that are small in time, small and near in time to them, as opposed to those that are far, although significant. That's called a current moment bias, and the reason why we procrastinate. These labels bring immediate feedback directly to the consumer of fossil fuels at the pump and help negate that need to procrastinate on tackling climate change. The second is a diffusion of responsibility. I emit a little bit of fossil fuels when I drive my car. My neighbor does too. Individually, our impact, our effect on the climate is small, but collectively it's quite large. And we know when responsibility is diffuse and spread amongst a large number of people, people are less likely to act, which is why in CPR lessons they teach you to individually identify and ask someone to go and report, call 911 and report back to you. It's not a large global message to the whole crowd. It's identifying somebody in that crowd and saying, go call 911 and come back. It's a isolating and direct responsibility on that person. This, unlike any other climate action, locates responsibility in the palm of your hand at the time you're at the pump. And finally, it's a problem. Climate change is a problem of negative externalities. So externalities. So the price of gasoline is, say, $1.50. Within that price are a number of costs which are required to produce the gasoline, everywhere from extraction to refining and all of the supply chain. Unfortunately, there are many externalities which are not included in the price, such as the cost of rising sea levels, which affects our coastal infrastructure, or the health effects on children through respiratory diseases. We can use some quantitative initiatives, such as a carbon tax, to communicate these externalities. But unfortunately, they don't do so in a way that they don't do so in a very effective way. These communicate externalities in a quantitative way, using images and text, and will hopefully engage our humanity instead of focusing on taxes, which I think everyone's hackles raise when they hear the word tax. It's a very divisive issue, and governments struggle to raise taxes on already taxed items like gasoline. So we think our initiative is what we call a disruptive innovation. We would like to denormalize and remove from the status quo the process of filling up gasoline at your local gas station. It is a rather thoughtless place, the gas station, and we'd like to change the conversation around what happens at that gas station and change the conversation in the community. And what do we expect to happen? Well, we don't really expect people to walk away from their cars at the Shell station. We think, actually, that they will become uncomfortable and frustrated with their own role in climate change and the alternatives that government and industry offers them in terms of transportation. So, and we must remember in this that change arises from discomfort, not complacency. So at two levels, we'll see this change manifest. The first, individual levels, behavior will change. So people will ride their bikes, take the bus, carpool, and that's great. However, we're more interested in a collective change, in which governments will now hear from a wide group of people who are otherwise uneducated about this idea, and they were uninterested, and it didn't seem to affect them. And government will then have the political capital they need to implement climate actions, such as better bike infrastructure, more money for TransLink, those kind of things that otherwise are difficult to do. And industry will also sense a demand for different alternatives and respond with green alternatives. We often think it's if you build it, they will come. It's not. It's if you want it, make them want them. If you make them want it, then you get to build it. Then they will come. And we hope that these labels will create demand for greener alternatives. We do have an extensive legal report outlining the jurisdiction of municipalities to implement these climate change warning labels, and I'll be happy to talk about that if you have any questions, but I sense I'm getting to the end of my time. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for coming. I'll let you know of one element of your research before you come to municipalities. You may want to check as to whether or not the consumer is allowed to touch that pump, because they're not in Coquitlam. So we have a rule against self-serve, which means that the only person that message would be seen, at least theoretically, by is the pump operator.
Thank you. So I had this similar issue in Richmond, and what I have done a little bit of research with gasoline retailers, and they've said that basically the pump and the box, basically the pump handle and the box itself, are one and the same. So the labeling requirements on both of those would be the same. There are no reasons why we cannot put a label on the pump itself. And I think that a label next to the litre and dollar counter at head height would be just as good a place to put the labels on. In some respects, we like this because it's right in the palm of the hand, but I see no reason that would be a barrier.
I just wondered if you'd consider that.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
To close, two requests.
You've been 10 minutes of your 5.
Sorry.
Just 20.
Quickly, though, I would like to ask Council to consider this initiative and send it to committee to consider implementing these labels here in Coquitlam. The second is to support a resolution put forth by West Vancouver asking the province of BC to do this across the board. The second option is a relatively easy option to do, and this vote will be coming to the UBCM in September. And we would like everyone to support it beforehand, so it's a mere formality in September. So those are 2 questions I would like to ask you.
I thank you
Thank you very
for
much.
summarizing that as well. Good. Really appreciate it. Mr. Burke.
Thank you, Your Worship. Next item, item 4, is a presentation concerning the 2014 annual report. I'd like to invite the General Manager of Financial Services and the Manager of Corporate Planning to come forward and present on this topic, and we'll call for speakers after the presentation.
You have 5 minutes.
5 minutes? Good, that'll get rid of all the questions. Perfect.
Oh, that's before the questions start.
Each get 5 minutes?
Dennis, thanks us for the report for 1 sec. Thank you.
Trying to use up some of her 5 minutes now.
I saw that. It's very
I
strategic.
appreciate it. Okay. So, good afternoon, everybody. Nikki and I are here together to present the annual report for 2014. I hope that you've all had a chance to look at it. It looks really great. This presentation, along with the SOFI report a little bit later in the agenda and the DCC report a little bit later in the agenda, complete the statutory reporting requirements that we need to fulfill to actually complete 2014 and have it behind us. So it's always a very happy day for the Finance Department. We have most of our staff all working on the same year for a change. This doesn't last for very long, because we'll be looking at the 16 budget before you know it. Anyway, traditionally, this document is considered a finance document in most organizations, but here at the city, this is actually a lot more than just a finance department document. This is a document that is a real team effort. All of the work plan reporting is done, and the accomplishments, which are so much more important probably to the community than really the numbers are, is done by Nikki. And of course, all the magic that puts pictures and text and color that make it look so great and make it attractive to the public to look at comes from our corporate communications group. So this is one of those things where when you get the right people doing the right job, you get something much better than us accountants could do on our own. So we love it that they make us look so good. This year in particular, we did a review led actually by corporate communications. You'll remember our old reports were like this, and they had a kind of a sort of a format that had a little binder, and it had a separate book with the statements. We've gone to one report because it's much cheaper. We're distributing more electronically, so we're able to print less copies, and we've been able to reduce our cost by about 60%. So we're really, really pleased about that. So just to get us going, I'll turn you over to Nikki, and she'll walk you through the accomplishments for the year.
Sure. Part of it, in terms of our accomplishments, one of the things that I think you'll also notice from this report that might be different than previous years is we've actually started to turn it into a little bit more plain language. So when we say, what did we say we were going to do, and what did we actually do? So you'll see when we report on our performance goals, it says, what did we say we were going to achieve, and what did we actually achieve? And a part of that is transparency and making it a little bit easier to read. For Coquitlam, for our strategic plan, we actually have 5 strategic goals, which I'm sure all of you are very familiar with, leading us towards 2021. And for each one of these goals, we actually track some quantitative performance measures, which are included in the annual report, and also some more qualitative. What did we do? How did we move forward with these? And in each one of the 5 strategic goals, we have quite a few highlights. So what you see on these slides are just sort of the tip of the iceberg of some of the things that happened in 2014. But under strengthening neighborhoods, which is really a goal that's seeking to have our community comprised of safe and clean and green neighborhoods that are inclusive and are well connected. And a part of the things that we did in 2014 to accomplish this is continued work with the province on the Evergreen Line, upgrades to numerous parks, which I know many of you were at the openings for, including Cottonwood Park and the Coquitlam Crunch. And also continued work done on the draft housing affordability strategy, focusing on research and public consultation in advance of a strategic framework. In terms of expanding local jobs and local prosperity, which is really seeking to secure a vibrant and local economy, I can say, thankfully, having lived in Coquitlam my whole life, it's been a pretty dramatic transition in terms of our local economy. In 2014, we looked at the tourism program to build Coquitlam's tourism capacity and raise our presence and help implement the Celebrate Coquitlam strategy. There was also our Economic Development Department did a number of partnerships with the Tri-City Chamber of Commerce, held business attraction meetings, and also business retention and expansion with hundreds of businesses actually inside the city of Coquitlam. There was also the initiation of additional commercial space in the Ani Group's Oasis building, Boza's Evergreen, BD's Austin Tower, and Cressy Developments. This is some good news for our community. In terms of increasing active participation and creativity, it's really about sustaining a healthy community that includes physical, spiritual, and social wellness. I think probably one of the primary successes in 2014 was the approval of the draft Parks and Rec Plan, which actually outlines the community's values and aspirations for our parks, our recreation, and our cultural facilities. There's also a number of festivals, 69, with actually the most popular one being Canada Day with over 60,000 attendees, which is very impressive for the city of Coquitlam. We also launched the Park Spark Volunteer Program, which is something that I actually find incredibly innovative in looking at what some of the trends have been in volunteerism in various communities and looking at people don't necessarily have months to volunteer, but they have 4 hours, and finding opportunities for residents to be a part of that and increasing participation in our community. In terms of enhancing sustainability of city services and infrastructure, it's really about establishing greater and better capabilities to deliver high-quality services built on social, environmental, and economically sustainable service models. So in terms of our successes for that, I think one of the primary ones was revising our solid waste and recycling services. So securing a new contract with BFI Canada, which actually saved residents over 20% on utility fees, which is something to really be proud of in our city. Our fifth strategic goal is in relation to achieving excellence. I can say, having worked for all 3 levels of government has been a privilege, but the amount of excellence in governance in the city of Coquitlam has been astounding and is actually a really welcoming transition for me in this organization. There's been a number of successes in this. So one was our annual Welcome to Coquitlam event with over 700 people attending. Continued work with the YMCA to develop an agreement and operate a community center in Coquitlam. Our Business Improvements Committee also introduced the Stop Doing list, and one of the things we looked at this year was the annual report itself. How can we make this better? How can we improve on the work that we're already doing? I think overall, in terms of our strategic goals, for those of you that had a chance to go through the annual report, you'll see under each strategic goal there's over 20 accomplishments that lead up to our business plan as part of our overall framework. I'll turn it over to Sheena now, who'll go through the financial planning.
You don't get to escape the numbers. It is an annual report after all. Yes. But there are some highlights, and of course, this part of the highlights is actually music to my ear. Like any accountant would love this. Assets went up, debts went down, and there's not a department that was over budget. So for me, this is a really great situation. The other thing that's really good, of course, is KPMG has, as you would expect, given us an unqualified audit opinion, and that means that an external reviewer has looked at what we do and has said that these financial statements properly reflect the transactions of the city for the year, and that we have met the stringent reporting requirements that we need to do for governments. So that's good. So looking at the city statement of financial position, or what most people would call our balance sheet, we ended the year with $321 million worth of cash, which is basically the same as the year before. It's almost identical, actually, which is remarkable. I don't think we've ever done that before. All of the cash that we hold seems like an awful lot of money, but in an organization this size, that's less than 1 year's worth of operations. And it's kind of broken into 4 major parts. I'm just going to quickly walk through them so that everybody understands where that comes from. The first group is funds that we hold for specific purposes. More often than not, that's money that comes from external sources, and it's held for very specific things that we must use on those things, like tax prepayments. They really, until we apply them to the taxes, they belong to the taxpayers, or deposits for damages and things like that. But the organization is large, there's lots going on, and that's a total of $86 million this year. We also hold money that's saved for future operations. We have a number of different kind of areas in our budget that we budget for every year, but they're operating kinds of things like tax appeals, insurance, and we budget a standard amount, but actually what happens in the year is the amount that you spend on any given year fluctuates quite quite widely based on things like if it's snow and ice, based on weather, if it's insurance, it's based on claims. And so in any year where we don't spend the full amount, we set aside what's left over because we know that there's going to be another year like 2008 where we had crazy amounts of snow and we'll need more money. And that saves us from upping and adjusting the budget annually to make it bigger and bigger and bigger. We don't want to have to do that. So that's what we save for operating purposes. The largest amount of cash that we hold is actually saved for our capital program. And Council will remember that our 2015 to 19 capital program was approximately $250 million. This is the money we're saving to make that happen. And some of that will get spent as we go along. Okay, our accumulated surplus is the money that we've had sort of left at the end, our earnings, if you would say, if you were comparing it that way, since the beginning of Coquitlam, so over 124 years, I think we're at 125 next year, it's been $41 million. 2/3 of that belongs to our utilities, so it's actually not really that big in comparison to our size. Also on our balance sheet, certainly the biggest piece, you're going to see our capital assets. And we ended the year with $1.8 billion worth of assets. That is the depreciated historic cost of all of the roads and buildings and pipes and equipment that we use every day to provide services to the community. We have to keep that in good working order. That increased by $93 million in 2014. $71 million the city built, and $22 million was built by developers on our behalf. But we add that into our assets, and now we have to take care of it. So we have to operate it and be prepared to replace it when it comes to the end of its useful life. That's one of our biggest budget challenges, is the fact that we have this infrastructure that the community relies on every day that we need to take care of, and it's very expensive. Also on our balance sheet, you'll see our liabilities. The city ended the year with long-term debt of $25 million. That's down $9 million from 2013, which is a really good thing. And the reason for that is we paid off almost all of the library loan. Remember, we short-term borrowed the library from the library in order to advance construction by 2 years so we could use our casino money, but we gave it to the community 2 years early. And on top of that, we paid off the borrowing that we did to get the $6 million grant for the paving on Lougheed and Barnett, if you remember that. So those are sort of really good debts, and they're now retired and moving forward with less. It's a good thing. Also on our balance sheet, we have at the end of the day what's called our accumulated surplus, which is a whopping $2 billion. Really, $1.8 billion of that is, it's basically our equity and our assets, how much of our assets we own, and that cash that's sitting on the balance sheet. So most of it is actually equity. It's not something that we can turn around and spend unless we were able to sell our assets, which of course we wouldn't do because the community relies on them every day. Okay? So once we get through our balance sheet, we'll look at our statement of operations, or what we would normally call our revenue and expenditure statements. And revenues for the year were $277 million for the city. 50% of those revenues came from our taxpayers in the form of taxes for services that are generally provided to everyone. Things like roads and parks and protective services. Okay? 25% of those revenues were services that were provided for a fee, so very specific services that only one person gets, things like admissions to programs, building permits, building license, or business licenses and things like that. And the remaining 25% was spread amongst a whole bunch of smaller things like grants and casino funds and interest earnings. On the expenditure side, city expenditures at the end of the year were $210 million, and that was split up. The largest area of expenditures are all the gray pieces of pie. Those are our public works, so that's roads and all the pipes, sewer, water, and drainage, followed by parks and recreation, which is the green piece of the pie, and then followed by protective services, which are the blue ones. Okay? It's a pretty small piece. 8% is our overhead, which is the cost of actually running government. Pretty low. So those of you who are really good at math will very quickly go $277 million in revenues minus $210 in expenses. Wow, we've got an extra $67 million. Well, remember that I just explained to you we spent $93 million on assets. So some of that revenue, those taxes that we levy, are actually to take care of our infrastructure. And that's what we spent on both new assets and retirement of debt. So we ended up, at the end of the year, we were able to put $4 million into our infrastructure reserve. And the good news is we were able to add some extra projects into our capital program that we hadn't expected. So we're going to be doing a little bit of extra work and more amenities at Rochester Park. some pedestrian and vehicle safety improvements, and we're going to do some rejigging of the parking at our senior centers because we know those things are very important to the residents in Coquitlam. So, what does all this mean? Well, it certainly means that, 2012-14 was a very good year. We achieved some major improvements on all of our strategic goals. We ended the year in a better financial position than we were to begin with. We know that we'll have lots of challenges ahead of us, but at least we're in a better place to move forward. So, I guess the final thing to say is this report, and as well as the little brochure, we will be submitting these to the Government Finance Officers Association as usual to see if we can't get the award for excellence in financial reporting. I'm confident that we will. And we will be submitting this along with our Just the Facts awareness campaign to the GFOA for the Popular Reporting Award. Also, I'm sure that we'll be successful in that as well. So keep your fingers crossed. Any questions?
Councillor Reid primarily likes it because there's a dog on the front.
Actually, I had somebody ask me a question, and I gave them my answer, and I sure as heck hope it's going to be yours.
Okay.
And it's
I'll try really hard. Tell me your answer first.
Notice how I preface my questions. In the capital assets, and you said they're depreciated. So a few years ago, because the province came in and said we need to make our big
Our tangible capital assets. Yep.
We had to go through everything underground, above ground, and anything that hovered in between, and get all our assets in order and get them all noted, which I assume that we have done all that. Have we completed
We have
that
absolutely
process?
done all of that.
Because lots of people haven't, right? Lots of other cities. are
Everybody's
still-
working on it. It was legislated in
I know.
2009, but yes, it's a struggle. And one of the things you have to remember is that most of that inventory is underground. 2/3 of our inventory is underground. And so it's taken off of plans. So remember, every time we dig a hole, sometimes we find a little adjustment. So there's adjustments every year.
We've got pipes where we don't know they are, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so on that question, the question that somebody gave me, so then, are all your, let's just take a building that we have, any building, it doesn't matter, a little
City Hall.
building, City Hall, and you're depreciating it every year by how much?
By over the expected useful life. So the life of the City Hall would be, I think, is 60 years. I'm not-
Yeah.
And so we would.
And every building has its own useful life.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so that was good, right? Okay. Second question was, if you have to replace something before the end of its useful life, and it still is being valued in here as a depreciated number, I assume if we had it in there, we tore it down and built up a new one, you would just adjust this. You
would take it out. So-
and then add the
yeah.
new one in.
And you can see those on your statements if you know exactly where to look.
Yeah.
You'll see a gain and loss on disposal.
Yeah.
And so we remove the old asset, take it out, put in the new one, and we record a gain or a loss depending on whether we traded it in or whatever. Proper accounting.
I want you to know I was right.
Well done. Not surprised at all.
Well, no, but I mean, it was a question that you don't get very often. It's one that you really have to think about, and especially when we're doing so much with roads. That's the big one. So we still follow that same
Yep.
procedure with the roads.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you, and I guess now we know it takes at least 20 years to be being on council to really fully understand and be able to explain to the public all of these things. Actually, the thought was going through my mind during your presentation that we should have these doors open so that people standing in line paying their property taxes this afternoon could have seen these results.
Pick up the boards.
Something like that. So that's because we have that's
Yeah.
the time of year that's happening, and they should know that it was a good year, and I certainly thank you for that. And council made some hard decisions, and we continue to have decisions in front of us. So one of the things that for people watching at home or the media, they heard several different surplus figures. Okay, money left over at the end of the year, and you explained rather quickly every one of them. The one that the public and the press should be most concerned about in terms of, okay, that's money that's truly surplus this year, and is what figure exactly?
The money we put into the infrastructure reserve, the $4 million.
How much?
$4 million.
Okay, because it said infrastructure reserve /$6 million on your slide.
That's the balance in the infrastructure reserve, because there was some money before we put this year's money in.
Good.
Right.
I thought that, so that's so it's How much went into the infrastructure
4
reserve?
million. And you see we're allocating, I think, 2.5, so we're leaving a little bit in there in case we have emergencies. The whole purpose of that infrastructure reserve is for those unforeseen infrastructure challenges. We want to have a little bit of money there just in case something happens. Some of our council will remember that a few years back, we needed that money to replace the roof at the Poirier Library because it started leaking really bad and we hadn't anticipated it, and we had the money to fix it.
So with that true surplus this year, we're being responsible, we're saving some of it in reserves, and we're spending some of it on
Things that the community wants.
needed,
Yep.
so we could advance a little more quickly, that we're responding to the public's needs.
Yep.
Good, thank you very much.
Thank you.
May I make one comment?
In a second. You're next. So, and my comment was related to the use of the word surplus. And I assume it's a statutory word or it's somehow set out in legislation, because I look at slide 13 and it says our accumulated surplus is $2 billion. I had a question from a member of the public that said, where is that money? And I said, it's not in my desk drawer. It's actually in the ground, and it's
the equity in our assets.
It is
primarily.
not how the public would view surplus. How much is my
Absolutely.
surplus at home? It's about my bank account. It's not the house value and the car value depreciated and all those sorts of things.
Right.
You
And that
go-
is a requirement. We must call it that, unfortunately. We're,
Hey, can you call it that with an asterisk? Because if you go 3 slides earlier, it says the accumulated surplus is 41 million. Well, if the accumulated surplus is 41 million and the total surplus and the accumulated surplus is 2 billion, the
yeah. But we
residents
break-
get confused.
Yeah, we break it up to try and tell you, here's what we call our overall surplus that we're legislated to call, and what's actually the built-up money you've set aside. So we think actually the accumulated surplus for all the years that Coquitlam has been here is that $41 million. The rest of it is set aside for particular things. It's not surplus at all.
It isn't surplus, it is,
Yes.
it is net worth, perhaps, the way
Yes.
people would contemplate net worth.
Yes, absolutely. That actually would be a way better word.
And so how do we, is it possible, we're trying to make the documents as user-friendly as possible. How do we make it so that people don't perceive that we overtax them by $2 billion or $41 million or whatever we're calling a surplus, because none of them are surpluses. The only surplus was the $4 million, which was made primarily by reducing costs. So how do we do this?
Well, it's a challenge. It's a challenge. We have to follow these reporting standards, but we can make a point of speaking to that in our presentation. And I can present it, and I can put accumulated surplus and put net worth, if that would be a better word for you, and I would like to do that. That would be better. It's a good point.
Okay. Councillor Reid.
My only comment, this follows so well, my only comment was that the fact that citizens are asking us questions and actually reading the statements, and they're coming up with these questions, means that, using lay person's language more and more, everyone's getting it, people are reading it, and that's really great.
Yes.
And to go along with the mayor's suggestion, I think we could just do a little note and put at the bottom, this is, net. You can consider this like net worth or whatever language you want to use. But I'm quite pleased that, did you hear Councillor O'Neill too? If we're getting the questions, that means people are paying attention, and that's the goal.
That's a good thing.
Yes, very good thing.
More questions are actually better.
And I did find my third version of, it was the annual surplus I was looking
Yes.
for. The annual surplus, which is 67 million, which isn't annual, and it's not a surplus.
That's right.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, that's right.
But it is in terms of our reporting requirements.
But that is in my
Yes.
desk drawer.
Yeah. Lucky you.
Councillor Mars.
Well, on that point, thank you. On that point, clearly that 67 million, of course, does include a significant land component of parks and a number of other contributions. It's not necessarily cash, and I think so. I want to echo some of the comments that have been made about really let's look. I recognize we've got statutory requirements. We've got to meet those, and clearly you've done that very well in the past to be recognized by the various bodies. That's great. We do. I think we can take a look at how we might develop a presentation style that the average consumer can relate to, utilizing things such as this is equivalent to a net worth, or if you're a businessman, this is in line with your retained earnings in your corporation. It's that type of thing that we can more closely align it. And just have some jargon around it. I know during the campaign there was some talk about whether or not the city had debt at all, and we clearly do. And it's laid out there, and I think again, if you look at it, some people will look, and I did, to question why we pay the rates we do on some of the debt. And it's for very specific neighborhood issues where neighborhoods have looked and said, I want this, and they did it at a time when the rates were a certain level. So again, I think if we look and try to work on the presentation style, so what we put on the website is what's required, but then some a Reader's Digest version, a Cole's Notes version that's actually written in layman's terms, in English terms.
I think that's what this is.
That is a step in that direction, but I think as we start to work on it, I think it's going to be very, I think it's a behemoth jump. Yeah. Well, I'm a little more critical, so I won't say it's a step in the right direction. But no, this is good. I think as we look to the presentation, I think we can, again, really stress those pieces. Good financial shape, absolutely. I'm happy with some of the pieces that we're going to target with the surplus this year, and to ensure that we can move forward with some of the projects. Rochester Park's one of the big ones. When we saw it and approved it, there was still a hole there in terms of where the funding was going to come from. That's where it's going to come from. So thank you very much.
Okay, and seeing no other council members with questions, we are going to open up this portion of the meeting. This is kind of like the annual general meeting at a strata council. Their surplus was probably smaller. So are there any questions or comments from the audience?
My flowers are dying.
Any comments or public comments at all on the audience members on the annual report? Seeing none. Mr. Clerk. Thank you, Worship. I will hand the meeting over to, thus ends the annual general meeting of sorts, and we'll hand it back to the acting mayor, Councillor Hodge. Thank you.
Mr. Clerk, next item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Next item is item 5, concerns the Coquitlam Low-Heat Neighborhood Plan and its development trends and lessons learned. We have introductory comments by the General Manager of Planning and Development and a presentation by the Manager of Planning Projects. Reports before you for information.
Move recommendation.
Second.
I'll go over and call
No stickies allowed.
No stickies.
I got the ocean.
I got the ocean.
The trading project. That's right.
I got the mummy and baby.
Mr. McIntyre.
Sir Bruce has arrived.
Looking very summery. Okay.
Yes, trying.
We were just talking about surplus, now it's Sir Bruce.
Or surprise.
Which one?
Okay, I take over the
Round
chair.
them
The
up,
meeting's
Chair.
gone to already. It's okay.
Chair's fault.
Mr. McIntyre.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon again, Mayor and Council.
Surprise.
Just a few opening remarks from my perspective before I hand it off to Bruce and Andrew. The Coquitlam Low-Heat Neighborhood Plan is another one of the major projects the department's working on, community planning, one of the divisions in the department right now. There has been recent updates to council reporting back on what we heard through the early phase public consultation part of the process. We're carrying on in meeting with property owners in the commercial group, and we have some subsequent information coming forward to council very shortly on that as well. But one piece that crossed my desk is the report you have here before you today, and this was some of the work that the project team was doing in looking at the Coquitlam low heat areas, because on one hand we're fortunate that we have some fairly recent neighborhood plans that are done. Like, we're not talking about a greenfields area or a visioning area. These are neighborhoods that are established. There's plans that are in place. So why not go back and do a checkup? How are we performing against those plans? What do those plans envision, and what's been achieved? So the project team did do that analysis, and I found it quite interesting, and I thought there were some things that we could have takeaways that would really help in preparing the updated plan. So I thought also this would be of interest to council and to the community as well as we go forward in the process. So that was really the genesis of this, this sort of reporting back at this time. So on that, I'll turn it over to Bruce. I think you've got a presentation just to cover off on the points. And we'll be back again in a couple of weeks' time with some updates and some other information as well.
Thank you, Jim. Through the chair, it's got to be close today, apparently. Thank you. As Jim mentioned, this is an information item for council as we come forward to some decision requests of council in the near future. We wanted to make sure that council had all the background information that we've been pleasurably exposed to. This particular item, as Jim mentioned, actually was an issue we wanted to dig into, but also had quite a bit of challenge from our project advisory group. And we wanted to respond to that challenge and make sure we answered their questions, and it was quite beneficial to our process. What we decided to do was look back at the existing plans, try to figure out exactly where we were right and where we were wrong, and try to make sure that as we bring another plan forward to this council, we improve from where we did right and correct where we did wrong. Sorry, I can't hear myself. Is this volume? Thank you. That slight typo, there was actually the original plan targets called for 3,800 units by 2021. A little bit further than halfway through, we're actually at 1,400 units, so volume-wise, we seem close. I'm going to talk more on this issue later. Before we were not successful at reaching our target related to new parks in the area. But with recent events, we have seen the developments in the agreement with the YMCA help towards the goal of a new community center. We have been relatively successful in terms of our greenways, thankfully, because that was added to our DCC program, as similarly to our intersection improvements and improving pedestrian and cyclist connections. We have not been successful at achieving some of the east-west streets that the plan originally called for. Primarily, the vehicle to achieve that was that we would look at redevelopment of adjacent lands when they occurred. So it really wasn't sort of within our time to determine that. When we look at the actual development in both the Coquitlam and Lougheed areas together, it's actually something we can comprehend quite easily. The 13 major developments you see here reflect every single major development over the size of a townhouse, or townhouse and above, I should say, that's occurred since 2002. Certainly those who've been on council or know the neighborhood well know each of these. And you can see that they've sort of paced themselves out over time with obviously a little bit, and we'll go into this in more detail, a little bit of a growth when the Evergreen line was finally approved. And, of course, the city's response of a TDS adopting shortly thereafter, as well as city responses of expanding the density bonusing and the CAC adoption. But those larger developments are really the ones that we can see now built and in place, reflect a considerable amount of the actual units, but not as many as you might actually think in the area. And just to illustrate that, in 2002, when we brought the plan forward, it was anticipated that the vast amount of growth would all be around the core. It would be in response to the Evergreen line. It would be along the North Clark corridor in Coquitlam and Lougheed. And that we would see the vast majority of it as high-rise. The plan also called for a significant amount of retail and a significant amount of office. When we look at what actually happened, it was quite a different picture. As you can see by the map, where development occurred seems to be the largest change, as well as the type of development, with a large number of suites and single families coming in to compose quite a bit, often with the demolition of an older home, replacement of a newer, duplexes, triplexes, townhouses, and low-rise apartments, with high-rise forming only about 23% of the overall units. Unfortunately, and we can talk more about this in detail when we come back with the market analysis, we've seen zero office development in either Coquitlam or Lougheed, and very poor retail development overall compared to our expectations. We certainly want to understand why and what we can do better for moving forward. But the key learnings are obviously that evergreen timeline changed the entire focus of what that plan hoped to be, that the housing market therefore performed differently and located in different areas. More development occurred in the shoulder. More development was a low-rise, duplex, single-family, and suite. And as a direct consequence, there were far fewer opportunities to negotiate additional green space and far fewer opportunities to get street dedication. So those were our prime methods that we outlined for ourselves in 2002. Similarly, there was far fewer opportunities than hoped for any kind of amenity funding back then. When we break it up a little bit, and I think this council is extremely aware of this given how much they've talked to residents in the area, the first 10 years sort of saw one pattern of development. we saw a large concentration of lower density, almost half of it being, more what we think of as a single-family townhouse duplex, a little bit, a quarter of low-rise and a quarter of the high-rise. For a large part, the plan held in our terms. That is, more than 80% of it was consistent with the plan, with about 18% forming OCP amendments through only two major applications. When we look in the last 2 years, we have seen quite a shift, with low-rise apartments obviously responding very strongly to the initial opportunities of the Evergreen line, and that's principally from one OCP amendment. And you can see there that the units created through the OCP amendment form quite a substantive amount of the change in just the last 2 years. Importantly, we established the TDS during this time to make sure that we had a process to guide those amendments, to make sure that we had some rigor until the plan got developed. And as we look forward, and this is, I completely confess, there's some editorial in these numbers. As we look forward, we've taken a look at what are the applications currently in the pipe. The applications that we know about in advance tend to be the larger ones. We don't generally know about suites and single-family homes until just a few weeks before, if you would. But importantly to me is the volume, with almost 2,000 units just in the larger type of applications currently in the pipe. The very substantive amount in terms of the OCP amendments, with 3 significant projects composing a good total of that. As we get suites and single families coming back in, I think that will fall back similar to the last 2 years. But again, we're still now seeing a tremendous amount of the work and speculation on the north side of the plan, whereas low heat is definitely garnering less interest at this time. What we do obviously see is that these developments, especially when you get the larger projects, the low-rise, and when you get the high-rise, you see a wave of volume, and we have to respond to that. You can deal with 100 units a year or suddenly 500 units a year. When we look at the correspondence to that, which is the funding for how we deal with growth, we're seeing similar waves. And very grateful to Sheena and her team, who was also helping us at the same time she was doing her annual report. And we're greatly appreciative of that, because our community associations were asking us considerable questions about the DCC funding, and they wanted it related to their neighborhoods, which is not how we collect it or account for it. So gratefully thankful for Sheena's work on this and her team. But as you can see, the DCCs tend to come in strong waves. They go out in waves as well, not quite as dramatic. And when we look at them by neighborhood, which was the challenge that the PAG gave us, we were actually quite pleased. You'll notice that about 11% of the overall collection of the city's total in this time period was in the Coquitlam low heat area. And about 9% of that was spent in that area. That's factoring in a portion of the citywide projects, the very 10% of them going to that area. But the difference of the 11 to 9 is most likely because of the lag in timeline. You collect the money first, and then you have a process for spending that. It's never identical. Very important to funding for growth is the introduction of 2 new funds to this area. The density bonusing system was expanded, again in anticipation and readiness for the growth, and the community amenity contribution adapted. And you can see the current balance of those 2 funds now as of April. Key learnings, again, is that there's been that relative balance. We're extremely pleased with that. The amenity funding for the area is expected to increase dramatically. We think that will be a very significant difference to the new plan. The Coquitlam Low Heat Neighborhood Plan servicing assessment will have to detail out all the infrastructure costs. And generally, new capital projects, of course, have the priority lists that are now tied to the department master plans. So a much stronger budgetary control in terms of a way to deliver on the plan that we create. I think that's really quite part of the message. We had a plan that seemed to, from the records I've read, be very well accepted in 2002. But I would describe it as a very aspirational plan. Had a lot of promises, but we had to make sure we can deliver on it. The difference is now we do complete, ever since 2012, we complete an implementation strategy for all our plans, and we also complete a servicing assessment. And the servicing assessment, again, costs out how that infrastructure is going to get paid for. Importantly, we have a density bonusing program in place now. We didn't before, similar to the community amenity contributions. And we were not successful in having the opportunities for major developments, but given the applications that are in the pipeline now, that opportunity for some negotiation is clearly forefront. Council, our next steps, when we'll be back to you, as Jim mentioned, we have completed a market demand analysis. We'd be glad to bring that forward to you. I think we're on agenda in July. We are meeting again with our PAG tomorrow night, actually, to review some land use choices. We'll be bringing back to council some land use options. Those go to council prior to going to the public. Those land use options, and we really feel they're real land use options, especially in the shoulder. What are the 3 different options we could do with this particular block? What would you like to see? We'll bring those to council first and then out for public consultation. We'll look for the most agreement on the plans, coming back to council again, and then we'll start to price out that plan, making sure that we can afford and deliver what we promised the plan to do. That's the highlight. We found that interesting. I suspect with the dialogue you have with your community, you know most of that information in a different way, but hopefully that was of use to you. And glad to answer any questions, especially with Mr. Merrill, the project manager.
Thank you. I've got myself, Benita, and May. Two quick questions. The target plan here in 2002 said that and you've corrected that figure. You said it was 38, but I think it was the type.
Yeah, the 2 plans were 19 and 19.
Right. So what is the new target, or is that going to not be really known until we go through the OCP? Is that where we will get because I presume these numbers have changed, but I either missed them, I didn't see the report, or is that something that we won't really know until we do the plan?
When we complete the land use options, those land use options will give us choices of how many units we might work for. There's a slight caveat to that. We always actually over-zone what you think you're going to get, because not every piece of property redevelops. But we complete with our market analysis work an expectation of what we expect in that area. And yes, those numbers will be updated, and they'll be consistent with what we can afford to do.
So the numbers presented here were what was presented in 2002.
Exactly.
And that was the last time these numbers were really updated then.
And we'll need new numbers to be brought forward with this plan, including, for example, new parks. What can we expect? Where can we expect? What can we afford?
And again, that was the question, is that the anticipation at that time was 3.5 hectares of new parks. I'm assuming that number will go up, especially if density goes up. So we will arrive at a new number again. Not necessarily knowing where and all stuff, but at least a new target.
We're very fortunate right now to be working closely with the Parks, Recreation, and Culture group, who are working on their master plan. We're trying to make sure both of these projects interrelate, which includes very much their capital plan and also opportunities to use items like density bonusing, et cetera. Sorry, Jim, did you want?
And I look forward to the next report on the commercial and that. I happened to step in for part of the presentation that you were doing with some of the commercial owners in the area, and there was some really interesting stuff there, and I look forward to getting the full presentation here. Thank you. Benita, and then May, and then Terry.
Okay, I know we're kind of in a rush today, so I'm just going to get right to it. So to me, the best page on the plan was this first one that showed that we were going to do 4 and it ended up densifying. So when I saw the title, Lessons Learned, I was like super excited because I'm an analyst. So I'm like, okay, what are the lessons learned? So on page 3, we say one of the key learnings is that while overall development of Coquitlam and Logie followed the earlier plans, the location and type of development was somewhat different than anticipated. So I was expecting the and so what. Like I was expecting tell me the so what. So I'm sure it's coming, but I'm just going to give you mine very quickly. So obviously we set targets for the number of units that we felt could be capacitated in that neighborhood, and we added some commercial commercial retail to it, and we added some green space to it. We've managed to achieve the target on the residential. We haven't come anywhere near the target on jobs, and we haven't come anywhere near the target on green space. So we're talking about the fact that we're going to talk about what we can afford, but we really need to talk about what's really feasible as far as the green space and the employment opportunities. Anyway, to go back to the insight that I garnered for it from that, the so what was, okay, so now we can't have it as dense around the core as we initially anticipated because we've already used up some of our density on a much farther geographical location. So in that geographical location, we thought we were going to have 1,000 people. Well, now we were going to have 800 along the corridor. We were only going to have 200 in the peripheral. Now we've got 500 in the peripheral. There's no way we should still be adding 800 to the corridor. That was my thought. My thought was that we're going to fight. We're going to fight it the whole way, or are we going to go with what people want, which is a little bit more of a gentle densification farther out. And then the second thing I wanted to talk about was the opportunity for linear parks rather than squared out parks that we can't get a hold of, because what this sheet kind of showed us was there's density spread out farther geographically, And can we connect, instead of having these super, super, super density clusters with all of the amenities super clustered, could we do like Klahani, where you've got one or two amenities, you've got linear park, you've got one or two amenities, you've got linear park. So anyway, it jumped out at me that if our idea is to go really super dense in the core areas, we're going to end up with way more density than we ever thought we were going to have. You're already struggling to find parkland. I know we said there's money aside, but money aside hasn't been spent. We haven't been able to secure the space. So I'm just, that was when I saw that chart, I thought that just changes everything, the way that it's already. And the other thing I liked about it was it's sharing their prosperity. Perhaps we thought that people were going to sell their houses and developers were going to come in and they were going to build these big towers. And maybe what we've seen is actual residents have been able to come and rezone, and they've been able to share in some of the prosperity, which I think is really nice. But the idea of not having super dense clusters and having linear parks seemed to jump right out on that map.
Mr. Chair, if I could, just a couple quick comments, and maybe Bruce or Andrew might want to comment as well. On the commercial piece, yeah, we're challenged that way, unfortunately. Not only there, city center. And that's why we wanted to reach out, do some commercial analysis, and reach out to the business operators. We got to try to crack that nut. We can build condos, but it's the commercial space. And so we want to make sure the plan is viable that way too, because we don't want to just create a residential community. So there'll be further information coming back to council on that, but I think we do have a challenge ahead of us in that regard. Just to clarify the numbers that have resulted, what we've seen happen on the ground, it's by and large, it's consistent with the earlier plans. It's just taking place in an area different from what the plan might have originally envisioned. Because the transit wasn't there. Once the transit was announced, that program was underway, then the development interest picked up in the core areas. So it's a little bit of a cause and effect. The transit wasn't there. There wasn't as much interest in those core areas, but there was still residential redevelopment pressure or opportunity in that area. So it went out to some of the easier, smaller, diffuse sites around the area. So by and large, it was consistent with the plan. It materialized in a different way, if you will. Bruce, Andrew?
Stop there before you go ahead. And I totally understand that. Like, I get it. But we need to understand that we've already, because it didn't come, and we've already built out density where we weren't expecting to get density. So we can't just pile people in with no employment and no green space by still going full steam ahead on what we wanted to have around the core. So I hear what you're saying, but at the same time, we have to react to what happened, not just full steam ahead and, oh, well, that happened. But so keep going.
Thank you. Do you want to respond?
I would say.
Andrew, do you have anything else?
Listen, maybe there's probably going to be more questions.
I might just clarify the sort of three groups of numbers or projections that we work with. The first one is sort of, there was the 3,800 units in the current neighborhood plan from 2002. That's a projection to sort of 2021. There's also kind of overlaid on top of that as part of our requirement to do citywide projections and incorporate them into the regional growth strategy with Metro Vancouver. It's a projection to 2041, and that's about 6,500 units for these two neighborhoods. And that's sort of a projection of how much we think will happen. There's also the capacity, which is the size of the box we're building, and it's a much bigger number. Theoretically, there's the capacity for tens of thousands of units in this neighborhood. It just depends on what land use designation you give them and how big you build the building. And that's that theoretical number can change drastically depending on decisions that are made around what the land use is. And then the third number is sort of our market demand. And through some of our early work with the consultants that we're hearing that the potential market demand in this neighborhood is higher than what our current projections are. More people would like to move to Coquitlam and Lougheed, but either can't because they can't find the right type of housing at the right price level, or, we're somehow constraining supply side, and then there's larger economic issues with housing affordability overlaid on top of that.
Okay, Councilor Reid.
Okay, loved it. I guess the thing that you're planners.
Guilty.
I'm getting to love you, but there's a couple of things that we don't do well, and that is we plan, and we do that very well. But when we try to get the message out, people have to understand that planning is a living document. It moves as the trends move. And so some of the trends that we're seeing come along now weren't even around 10 years ago. People have tried them, some of the housing choices. Now they're coming. Now we like them. Now we can incorporate them in ours. And we have an analyst now who all the numbers have to be right in the neighborhoods. But planning doesn't work that way, and neither does the world, because what happens is what you think you're going to put in, as soon as the housing choices change, then the density changes. I think the things that we're missing here is people have to understand that this moves, the landscape moves as we go along in any plan. You can put down what you want, but 10 years from now, we may be building something we haven't even thought of, castles with moats, or, who knows what we're going to end up getting. I realize you overzone, but my prediction is we're still the burbs.
Right.
And, excuse me?
No, it was just, I didn't see it, yeah.
And I think, and I know for a fact in this market today that's out there, families are coming in short on cash because our housing prices are ridiculous, and we're going to be looking for larger suites. So some of the high rises, even though we may get we'll get the density, but they'll be spread out. Instead of having 80 units in it, they may have 60, but they're going to be much bigger units that can accommodate families, correct? That's what I think is going to happen. I think we're going to end up with larger suites, so less families, but the same amount of space. The commercial space, I think we're missing, but everybody in the burbs, every city you talk to, there's not a lot of, office space has always been something that there's been too much of, and we're no different than anywhere else. I think that for our commercial space, we're going to have to be much more liberal in our zoning and the things that we allow in the bottoms of the towers we're building, so that we can have dance studios and yoga things, not just coffee shops and nail salons. And so I think we're going to have to broaden our uses, and I think probably we're going to have to bring tax incentives in or some kind of other incentives to get people to come into Coquitlam for the first 5 years. And I'm really delighted to try and work on some of those things, because those are what makes it work. I think this is good. Loved all the comparisons, but I really do think that somehow we have to get the message out that these aren't written in stone, and that over the years, just like you've seen the changes, what we thought would happen 10 years ago didn't actually work that way, and what we think is going to happen 10 years hence isn't going to be working that way either. But I would like to see us take a good look at what we're allowing in the commercial space that we're building. So I think zoning and incentives are the two things that we have to put on our plate. Thank you very much.
Just quickly, we would like to come back, as you mentioned, through the chair. We have done some market analysis work. We have looked at some of the commercial and retail challenges to understand what they are. One of the things that we certainly wanted to respond to very early, though, is a simple one-dimensional solution that just zone it and it comes, was clearly what 2002 tried to do, and it didn't work. I think Andrew could probably pull out of his head the total amount of area open. I'm sure it's more than 1 million square feet.
Like 10 million potential square feet of commercial.
Right, and so obviously, we take to your point, we would love to have a more fruitful discussion about other things council may or may not wish to do in order to move that needle.
Well, if we don't do it, we don't do it soon. Our neighbors are going to be doing it, and I'd like to do it first. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you very much. On your very first slide, you had the planned target for 2021, the actual new units by 2014. And then on the third slide, you had the same, what was anticipated, what actually happened. But the numbers are different.
Yeah, sorry, sir, I did verbally correct that in my presentation. Sorry, it's 3,800 was the target, with 1,400 created. It should be...
So it's a combination of the two. So your first slide says 2,800.
It should be 3,800 there, sir.
38, I missed that, and 14 created.
Right. Now, the number on the third page, you're quite correct, eagle eye on me. The number there is slightly different.
It says 1896 for what actually happened. That looks like a pretty specific number.
What it is what we did on the first number for creation is we subtracted demolitions. You often get a single-family home demolished and a new single-family added. We had about 400 demolitions in the area.
Okay, so this would, I was trying to understand Councillor Zerillo's points about what was targeted and what actually happened, and Councillor Zerillo, I think, was saying that that left a very small window for actual zoning, actual density in core areas. But if our planned target overall for 2021 was 3,800 units, and actually we created 1,400 new units by 2014, and of those, a quarter were high-rise apartments, and 31% were low-rise. So that would mean that there's, even with Councillor Zerillo's analysis, there was still a pretty big envelope in which there could be density, and density in the core, if that's what was. So it's not a small window. There's quite a big gap there, and still quite a big window from my understanding of it. Am I misinterpreting that?
I think the question, sir, relates to the capacity for the area in terms of land use is exponentially higher than this. The question raised is in terms of ability to provide green space, ability to service it, ability to provide transportation is, of course, the tricky balance.
Right. Okay. So the 2002 plan anticipated 3,800 units by 2021. The new plan that we're working on now, it will look forward to 2034. What date? 20.
Through the chair, it'll look forward to 2041, which is the same as the targets in the rest of the city and the regional growth strategy.
Regional growth strategy, okay, good. And so, but, okay, so another 2 decades of growth to look at there. Good. Good, thank you. I needed to understand that. A point I wanted to make just in response to the lack of commercial development. Certainly we saw projections for that, hoped for that, but as with the residential, the high density around the core, a lot of that was precluded on an assumption that the SkyTrain would come a lot sooner than it's come. I would be very careful about trying to do multi-layered plans of tax incentives or anything until we see the impact of SkyTrain. I certainly don't want to be caught with pants down, but the ability to bring workers into an area, low-cost transit, they don't have to have a car, they're not going to have to park, is tremendously important. I worked in a downtown and magazine business for many years, and we had telemarketing rooms there. We did not pay our telemarketers a ton of money, but they, and our rents were fairly high, but we could have found cheaper rents, but we couldn't have got the workers. We could have found cheaper rents in areas where there was no rapid transit, but the workers wouldn't have come there. We had to exist in a downtown, in the then downtown core area, or Metrotown or something like that, where there wasn't a huge difference actually in what the office rents were going to be, because that was the only way we could get the workers to fill our telemarketing rooms. And so that had a huge impact. Huge impact. So right now, you know, if somebody wants to set up a telemarketing room in Coquitlam, people have to take the bus or drive and park, and that's just too inconvenient, too time-consuming, or too expensive. They're not going to have to face those obstacles when the SkyTrain comes, and so I think that's going to be the catalyst, just like it's the catalyst has been and is the catalyst for the dense residential as well. Contradict me if you see it differently, but that's the way I see it. Am I based on the right track, or do you see something that there's something else that really is a major factor in here that we have to be worried about regarding commercial?
Well, the one I will contradict you, no one in Canada is building call centers. I'll catch you on that one.
New call centers.
New call centers aren't being built in Canada, going back to my economic development days, so I'll give you that one right away.
Overseas, that's right, yeah.
We have a presentation in a detailed market analysis. The market analysis is in council's binder in the lounge as well. It's quite a thick document. We made it available through there. Love to have a discussion with council on what they would or would not like to do and when they would like to do it or not in terms of office and in terms of commercial. That being said, I think part of that conversation also looks at the conversation related to city centre. We have to look at Coquitlam in terms of what our overall opportunities are. Right now, Coquitlam as a whole has 660,000 square feet of office space. Greater Vancouver has almost 55 million. So we are 0.0 some %. So I think we need to be realistic about what we can or can't do and have a fruitful discussion on that.
Thank you. Okay, Chris, then Brent, then Richard.
Thanks. Just on the commercial and office, I mean, I think the concern you had was everybody's trying to get more office space, more commercial. There's a glut in the suburbs, and that's the concern that we have, isn't it? That all these other cities are going to start bringing in incentives to try to draw businesses in, right? I was actually going to ask a similar question to Councillor Reid about the family-sized units in the condos. I think everybody read about New Westminster changing their bylaws to incorporate 3-bedroom suites in the lower areas of the condos. Are we looking at anything like that in this neighborhood plan?
I think we'd like to have a discussion. One trend we've seen is not a particular number pulled out here. Townhomes seem to be a very desirable product, both by buyers. They also seem to be something based on our community consultation that the community is extremely accepting of. We had almost no townhomes built in Coquitlam Lougheed in the last year, so we've seen a little bit of a hit on that. More other products, though. So I think we want to look at our land using, and when we bring our land use choices back, present those questions to council as to what kind of a mix they would like to see from a regulatory standpoint. I mention that because generally people will start looking for a single-family home. When they can't afford it, they can either move elsewhere or they can look for a different product. And they tend to graduate through different product, meaning first duplexes, then often townhomes, and then they go into looking for a multi of some form. We haven't yet seen a trend in Greater Vancouver for larger suites. I know that trend is still very dominated by Vancouver, though, so we don't really know what the suburban trend is going to be. And I think the opportunity is for us to try to make our own ground on that.
And I appreciate the market dictates to a large extent, but also often the market dictates that they can make more money on 1- and 2-bedroom suites and a little less money on 3-bedroom. So I think at some point, like some of the other cities are looking at, we may have to do something about that. When this plan was originally done in 2002, when it was adopted, was there anything about rental replacement when it came to redevelopment in any of this area?
No, the 2007 affordable housing strategy. Sorry, I've been training myself to say housing affordability. The 2007 affordable housing strategy was the first one that mentioned that, but there's no particular neighborhood plan that ever made it address.
And then the only other question was, when this was adopted in 2002, we didn't have the community amenity contributions set up. We didn't have the bonus density set up. How did we anticipate that we were going to deal with the growth and the needs in the city at that point?
Through the chair, from what I've been reading from back then, a couple of methods. One was we would just use debt servicing and taxes. We would just borrow the money and build something and pay it off through the capital program. We would also negotiate with larger major developers in the core who had larger land holdings to essentially try to get amenities for free or at reduced cost, similar to the way we got Glen Pine through the Boza redevelopment here in City Centre. We were hoping for more opportunities like that. But as Bruce said earlier, the plans in 2002 were very aspirational and didn't actually contain a lot of detail about how to achieve amenities, which is partly reflected in the fact that we haven't achieved a lot of amenities.
I can more specifically answer that one. I think it shows it's a good sort of then and now comparison. Yeah, the 2002 plans had some real high hopes and some good ideas, but not really the tools as much to attain that. And it's interesting that, in fact, it was one of the BOZA project at the Safeway site, because it actually got started back under the previous plans, and through that process there was some, consistent with the plan, there was some negotiation about some contribution, but it was pretty modest, because that's, the tools were not clear, the policies were not clear. Later, as that project went through its sort of life cycle, the density bonusing system was put in place, and when they went to upsize their project, they then fell into the density bonusing, but it was just for that incremental amount. So now we've got a much more solid basis for proceeding, or, making those, seeking those contributions.
And there's no demand.
And so when that particular project came up 4 years ago, 5 years ago, the BOZA project with the Safeway, we didn't negotiate any amenities at that point?
There were specific amenities for the site that were negotiated. There was also some contribution. I can't remember the numbers, but they were modest numbers that were to be received for community amenity contributions. As once that project got its approvals, then we actually extended the density bonusing system to that area.
Thank you. Just to clarify, but going back in this, because we're really what we're doing is looking at a plan that was laid out in 2002 and doing sort of a check-in where we are based on that plan. So some of the things that we're doing today weren't envisioned back then, such as bonus density and other things. So at that point we were just negotiating, but that's not factored in. There's no estimate of how much we would negotiate, so that's not in here. Okay, good. Thank you, Brent.
Okay, thank you. One of the things I wanted to make is what Mr. Steblin here came in a number of years. It started really within the Northeast, was an implementation strategy and a servicing assessment. Because when we did the Northeast, we were working through the Northeast, there was no cost assessments on how we're to achieve anything. And what we did do is bring in those two tools to do an analysis. When we've done the Coquitlam plan just recently, we have a servicing assessment for what it's going to cost to do the plan, how much utilities, what's going to cost, and is it affordable, and how do we afford that. So this plan here, when I go back to it, was a fairly aspirational plan without, I think it was said, without very much detail. So when we compare back, we're not comparing apples to apples. This is quite a bit of different thing. I want to hit on what May said earlier. I want to highlight this. I've been involved from the community side of it, now to council, about neighborhood plans, OCP documents, are living documents, but they're not written in stone. They are documents that are flexible and changing because we can't accurately predict 2 years out, let alone 20 years out, exactly what the growth should be. We have a general guideline and we try to update them on 5 years. We don't even do that on a regular basis because we just don't have the staffing time to do them all. But they give us that broad guideline on how that area should be shaped and should be looked, but different things happen all the time. So I think the mistake a lot of people from the public and people sometimes on council is thinking that this thou shalt be the plan. And I just want to highlight what I think what May was trying to say, the same thing, that these things change. And I guess the other question comes down to, you sort of touched on it, and is that in 2002, what was our population requirements, and what's the change between 2015 as we do the Coquitlam low heat? So when we looked at the numbers prior to 2002, they would have been for 2,000 or projections down that time. We've had a great. So when we come with your plan coming up when it finishes, the visioning, you'll be able, I don't know if you have it now, but there's going to be quite a difference in the population expectation in the region, which is going to change your numbers from the 2,800 units upward. Because you mentioned something like our share is now 6,500, or it could be 7,000 units between the two areas now comparative. Was that correct?
Yes, sorry, through the chair. Yeah, that's correct. The current population target in the regional growth strategy for this area is about 6,500 units by 2041.
2041. Yeah, and so that changes how we look at the area, how we look at the core, and how we look with developments going down North Road, if we're going to go down North Road by stretching it out. I guess I'm going to talk again about commercial space. I think commercial space for services to the residents will happen because as you put density around it, there will be people seeing the need and the opportunity to service that density in that area. So whether it's your dentists, your stores, your doctors, all that type of stuff will fill into those areas. Hopefully not a lot of nail salons, but we're hopefully be better than that. Yeah. But the thing is, I do think, we have to look at ways to attract office development into this area. And the one thing that is hurting all suburban areas is the continuation of Vancouver approving office space in downtown and not letting it go out into the region. There's been a debate at Metro and a discussion with Vancouver about the effect they're having on the office space. I think, May, you know about that. That's a big problem for us. I've talked to a lot of people, though, when they look at Coquitlam right now, it's an affordable place to purchase. And if you're coming from Vancouver, Burnaby, different areas, Coquitlam is seen as being quite affordable to get in and buy places right now. Legislating 3-bedroom units in there, we could look at that. It all depends, I think, what you're trying to say, and if I'm correct, Bruce, was that the cost. You know, you can legislate it, but will people be buying them? What's going to be the cost to purchase a 3-bedroom versus a 2-bedroom for people? Yeah, I think. Okay.
Just a quick point. Completely acknowledge, as it's come around twice, that yes, plans change. Plans also allow us to be prepared for change, and that's what we hope to make sure that we provide. It's very similar to the way that the TDS provided some extra time for us to guide other changes. And yes, we are looking forward to more of an office commercial discussion. I'd also just mention your exact point about the City of Vancouver has gone through quite a bit of a strong production lately in its office. I know that our Mayor, Richard Stewart, has twice been quoted on that very issue, pointing it out from a regional perspective. So we are aware, I think, as a city that is another one of the challenges.
Yeah, good. Thank you. Richard. Okay. So I'm going to actually agree entirely with May and with Brent on the fluidity of this stuff, and others have said it as well. And that's normally it's fluid. You plan and then you expect that you won't be doing exactly as the plan does. This particular case, the plan isn't even relevant because the plan referred to core, and core is defined by a SkyTrain station. And for the first decade of this plan, we didn't have a SkyTrain station even confirmed. We're not even sure that's the route for a good portion of it. And so there's all kinds of the development that couldn't possibly take place because it wasn't around core, because core wasn't confirmed. We finally and this is one of the perfect examples of why we need to get our planning on regional transportation way better. This kind of referendum sort of planning, a kind of perhaps provincial announcement on stuff that's supposed to be regional instead or local. They make really lousy decisions, and they make it so that OCPs become irrelevant because we can't. It's like planning for buses up in Burke Mountain and not having the buses and then having to respond to the realities of not enough parking because we put the parking in that would be required if you had a decent bus network. Terry mentioned that whole idea that this is predicated on SkyTrain. So I looked at the numbers completely differently. I thought it was an enormous success, partly because 1/3 of what actually happened on a single-family lot. It happened in suites and in duplexes and in the really the gentle densification of our existing neighborhoods. That was fully 1/3 of what happened. And in spite of the realities associated with SkyTrain, we still got almost 1/3 of it, or 1/4 was high-rise apartments, and the other 1/3 was low-rise apartments. So I'm surprised that we got as close to what the plan was without defining where core was. So now that we have core, we now end up with this enormous pressure, pent-up demand and the pent-up supply, potentially, for the core area developments, and we're gonna see those. I actually like Benita's concept of linear parks, because I think Coquitlam has one of the only opportunities. It's got a core that's relatively flat all the way around it, and the potential for long trips by bike to a central place that gets on transit. And I'm not sure we've accommodated. I'd love to see us look at how we accommodate enough bike storage at SkyTrain stations, secure bike storage. at the Coquitlam station in order to allow a linear park system to be able to draw non-pedestrian and non-bus traffic. Otherwise, we're obviously going to need some parking. And similarly with the industrial versus the office, the big challenge there, I still think, and we bring it up all the time at the regional level, is that if Vancouver continues to oversupply the office market in the downtown core, there's no chance in the world that we're going to end up with office development here. So we end up with a regional growth strategy that says we must protect all of the remaining industrial land, all of which is in the suburbs, because this industrial land in Burnaby is designated residential. We've got an oil refinery in North Burnaby that's designated residential in the regional growth strategy, because they want the industrial out in the suburbs further away, and they want the office buildings, because office produces a whole lot more taxes and better jobs and all that sort of stuff. If we can't fix that, then we're going to end up not with a better livable region, but rather with a region that continues to be office-centric downtown and industry-centric way out in the suburbs. And it's not the region that the regional growth strategy was intended to address. So I looked at this with fascination. I thought the report was really almost predictable. If you had designed in 2002 a plan that said, what if we get SkyTrain and what if we don't? If we don't get SkyTrain, the development's going to be everywhere because there's no core. And if we do get SkyTrain, the development's going to be around the SkyTrain. We get the best of both worlds. We get a good amount of development in the 800 meters beyond, and we ended up with eventually getting SkyTrain, but I wish we had that back in 2002 when it was long overdue back then, and here it is 15 years later, and it's stuck somewhere in Port Moody.
Something else? Dennis.
Hey, thank you. I'm not going to talk about Vancouver's actions in terms of the office space. I think that's been extremely well articulated by several people already. That said, I think there is absolutely going to be a need for office space for professional service, local professional services for the people that are going to come into this area. And so, again, I think we talked about the fact that the zoning is there to enable it. There just hasn't been a demand yet. So I think as a discussion, we're pretty clear we want to create employment opportunities or environment for employment opportunities. We want to be able to address the spectrum of residential needs from condo through townhomes, multifamily and into single family, and the need for amenities. So by way of questions, have we taken a look in terms of we saying 6,500 units? Are we comfortable that adequately addresses the population expectation in the RGS, or would we look and see that there's going to be, more homes, maybe not greater density, but more single family that do have that secondary suite that would address the RGS needs, or is that a separate piece?
Do you want to jump at it?
I can do that.
There you go.
Yeah, so regionally the RGS just gives Coquitlam a target, and then it's up to us to decide how we distribute that around the city. So if we were to potentially explore putting more population in Coquitlam and Lougheed in the future, it needs to come from somewhere else in the city. Unless we think for some reason overall growth in Metro Vancouver will increase above sort of regional projections.
Okay. So it's just moving the chess pieces within our borders. Yeah. You're satisfied that we're...
I think just to add a twist to that, I'd like to clarify that we have within those buckets of breaking up the RGS, we certainly have a target for the Coquitlam Lougheed area, but that target realistically could be achieved with the land uses that are in place now. The question this plan wants to and needs to address is how we make sure that density is properly positioned throughout the community, keeping the areas we want to, core where we want to core, and supplying the right amenities. So we feel we have capacity. There certainly should be land use changes. It looks like the way this is going that we want to bring forward as options. But those land use changes are not about driving up capacity. They're about trying to make sure the community is built right, levered right, transitions right. As Andrew alluded, if anything, we think the demand in this area will probably exceed what the RGS forecast we would have for the section.
So from the major infrastructure perspective, as you look down the Clark North Road corridor, we're comfortable there with as pieces come forward that we're going to be able to address the concerns that people have with movement and congestion?
Yeah, we've been working closely with our colleagues in engineering and public works on all of their models and projections that they have, both for transportation and utility capacity.
Okay. And lastly, thinking with regards to the office space and that, are we engaging the development community with regards to, we talked about incentives and May talked about some that have been attempted in the past or discussed with regards to taxation. Are we having dialogue with them about what sort of tools we're going to have in our toolbox in the form of incentives to encourage these things to go forward? Because there may not be the need right now, but if we have the opportunity to build it now, over the next 10, 15, 20 years, there is going to be that need, as I said, whether that be doctors' offices, just general professional services.
We're fortunate that David Monroe, with John's leadership, leads much of that charge for us. Through this process, we have initially started a dialogue with commercial property owners. Our main goal at that time was to share with them all the information that we as a city had learned, the professional market analysis, make sure they had access to it. We also wanted to make sure that they were aware. Most of them have a very, very generous land use. Most of them are C7. We wanted to make sure they were aware of what that land use did. We wanted to allow the market analysis group to share the potential impacts of, one councillor mentioned already, the effect of our neighbours in terms of the shape properties and the redevelopment of Lougheed. What might impact you have, either do you get ahead, do you wait, and what are possible business decisions. So it's really about providing information. I think going forward, and again working with David closely, that would probably be the next set of questions we'd want to ask them. What would interest them? Right now, what we've mostly been asking them is, are there any obstacles that we've created? And then I think the next generation of questions would be, what else could be done? But I think that would require, to be fair, a very fruitful discussion, because I think it's a citywide discussion, as I say. And right now we aren't at all. We haven't opened up that box in terms of should we look at incentives or anything like that. Not at this stage.
Because I think that's an area that we are going to have to look at least to have the dialogue. So you've got all the information, and then we can decide at that point in time when we want to turn on that tap. Do we need to turn on that tap? That's been critical. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. Okay, I had Benita and Terry, I guess, follow-up questions on the report. So.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I really like what I'm hearing you say, Bruce. I did see, I think it was last week or before, someone in the city of Vancouver did like a density presentation, like they did a workshop, and they were talking about neighborhoods and quality versus housing and quantity. And I can hear that you are on the neighborhood quality side, more than just how much housing can you put in the space. So I thank you for that. I wanted to just add, because we talked about the towers. I think the mayor said that the developers do collect the data, they just don't share it. If we could get data on who's buying, are they families, are they investors? If we could start now gathering that data, because you said the townhouses are very high in demand. People like the townhouses. I'm going to assume, I don't have the data, that says that the townhouse is a family home and that people stay. I want to understand if that's what's happening in our towers too. Are they family homes and are people staying, or are they investment properties? And the reason I'm asking is I did, over the weekend, both the Encore and the Cora are on the RBO. They are renting right now for summer holidays. Some people have 2, 3, multiple suites in these buildings. So I would like to understand, what are we building for in Coquitlam? Are we building for families, or are we building for investment? And then the other thing I wanted to mention, when you talked, you just opened up about what's happening on the Burnaby side. What's going to be our point of differentiation? And it can't just be, well, we're cheaper. Like, when you go up farther, you go east, the cheaper it gets. There has to be something that says, why would you buy on our side rather than the Lougheed side? Look, what that is.
Okay, thank you.
You're hoping I'll answer that one?
No. Include it in your next report. We'll give you some time to answer.
That's why.
Terry.
Yeah, it's the slide right before this. I had a question I meant to ask the first time around, and it's actually the reason I put my hand up to begin with. The bottom line there. The X for opportunity for major developments, the X and the question mark. That suggests to me that there was no opportunity for a major development in the 2002 plan. doesn't make sense to me, because we'd anticipated big core development. Is that not a major development? And then the question mark for a new plan, does that recognize the ability of council to approve a plan that closes the door to any major development? Is that what that reflects?
I'm not sure if it's. I'm not sure, sir, if it's either the tense of this particular slide or the exact wording. What we are trying to communicate is that our hope was from 2002. There was an expectation that a large amount of development, as others have mentioned, would respond to the coming train. Those large developments, similar to the Bosa development across the street here, often offer opportunities for some negotiation. We didn't get the kind of opportunities and the volume of opportunities we had expected.
Because everything else above that actually wasn't there in the 2002 plan.
Correct.
There was no implementation plan.
So it's a tense.
There was no
it's
beyond
wording.
tense. Okay. All right. So there was an opportunity given to developers in the 2002 plan. It wasn't taken up.
Right. We, as a city, didn't have the opportunity. Whereas, and I think the purpose of the question mark is to remind ourselves that we're not in the driver's seat often of when those developments might come to our door and allow us the opportunity.
Well, again, everything else is there's going to be an implementation strategy. There's going to be servicing assessment. We have a density bonus program. We have community amenity contributions. So the question mark implies we don't know if there will be opportunities for major developments. But that's what
we don't know what they are.
Well, you don't know what they are.
have
but, you know, anyways, no, really, that one of these does not fit.
We'll put that one on a separate slide with a different wording.
Slide. Okay, thank you. The recommendation has been moved and seconded. Did you get the mover? I thought it was going to say.
Nope.
Okay,
I'll move it.
Moved by Brent, seconded by Councillor Marsden. All in favor? And any opposed? That's passed. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We're now moving on to the Engineering and Public Works portion of the meeting. First report number 6, concerns the 2014 Urban Wildlife Program update, and is before you for information.
Move receipt.
What about bear sightings yesterday?
Moved Councillor Reid, seconded Councillor Marsden. We're going to see the result, or just receive it.
I've got a question.
Oh, we have a question. Okay, I'll ask Joseph to come forward. Councillor Zerl has a question on the report.
So much of the report was about bears. You know what I care about? Rodents. So I see 3/4 of the complaint calls were rodents. So I just want to understand if the city feels that we are having a declining, increasing, steady rodent problem, and if we're addressing it at this point in time. Because I do get a lot of calls and a lot of resident conversations around how many rats are in South Coquitlam.
Through the chair, we would like to keep you for a little while longer in suspense. We will be reporting back to council in the next 2 to 3 weeks specifics on the rodents and some of our solutions. So
that's fine. That's great.
We'll
Thank
wait
you.
for that report. Anything else, Councillor Searle? No.
Thanks.
Councillor Wilson.
Thanks. My question was about the green waste cans and garbage cans out the night before driving home from the Riverview panel discussion down at the Executive Hotel, driving down Rochester on that night, whatever night that was. And it seemed to me almost half the residences had their garbage cans out and their green waste cans out the night before. I noticed on my street, people do it.
Yeah.
Put them out, you have to keep them clipped.
Can't put them out the night before.
Yeah. I was driving. I was trying to. So, do we ever have file officers go by the night before and put warning stickers on them, or like how do we deal with that unless it's a complaint based, or unless it's a result of the bear nuisance call? Because there's a lot of people that aren't getting the message. The lowest one is that area.
Bear Street.
We do patrol the neighborhoods. I guess it depends on what time of the night it is, but we do focused, area specific blitzes, I guess we could call it, but we do also have regular patrols of the neighborhoods and we do respond to the complaints also. So in that particular instance, maybe you could let me know what the date was, and we can look at that a little bit more closely. But we are tracking that, and we are watching that. So,
so feasibly, if you knew about it, you would how would you deal with the fact that people are putting their garbage cans up the night before?
Well, we send our staff around either that night if they're available, or in the next morning they would be going to that neighborhood and speaking directly to those residents and following up on that with warnings or education or whatever's warranted in the situation.
I noticed that the number of bears that we relocated seems to have gone up a lot, and if people aren't following the regulations, bears get relocated and they seem to come back, and then we kill them. Where are we in terms of testing the locks that are self-unlocking? Are we any further along with making any progress on that?
Yes, my understanding is that the locks for testing have arrived from back east, from Ontario, and currently they are with the local supplier who is doing tests before they would install them on some of the cans that will be distributed in the neighborhood for real-life testing. So it's in the works, and we should see those cans, 20 or so, with the new locks relatively soon.
And last year we had a lot of residents complaining about late green waste pickup, especially in the bear intensive areas. Are we smoothing that out? Are we confident that the green waste collection in those areas will be done earlier than what seemed to have been happening last year? Growing pains are getting behind us.
We're still working on that, but we have worked with the contractor to bring on an extra vehicle in our Monday and Tuesday collection zones to help expedite the collection, particularly on Burke Mountain and the Plateau. But we do still have some work to do there to help make that collection as efficient as possible.
Just to partially answer that question, because I live up in bear territory, I do know that they are out in the evening up on Burke Mountain, and they have done. So I think it's primarily where there's concentrations of sightings that they have. Drake has been out and gone out in that area. So I think it's sort of complaint driven, but also I think priority is given to the areas where they know the bears are most active. So
that's correct.
And I've also noticed an improvement on the green can pickup. So that Monday pickup, which is the Burke Mountain area, has improved. But the solid waste, and we do know that we still have bears getting into the black cans. And last week, for example, on my street, the pickup was 5 to 7. 7 is the absolute time frame they have to get it picked up. But when you're across the street from Hyde Creek, having pickup at 5 to 7 isn't working. So I think there's still some work to do in that area. Brent.
Well, good report. Actually, I'm quite happy to see that. Hopefully, I think by this fall we'll be get the status of Bear Smart, and something I supported initially, and it's taken a little while, but I'm quite pleased that we're going to be one of the few urban cities to get this designation. And I want to say that the fact that we had a Bear Smart program has led to this collection of information that we now have called urban wildlife, but we've been able to, through this program, track just not the bears, but all the other wildlife in this area. So I find that quite helpful. It is information that flows back and forth. I guess I also want to point out is that our green waste cans are not bear proof, but bear resistant. That we had a bear just below us. People leave their green can outside all the time with the locks on it, but it's an attraction. You should really try to keep your green can inside, because the bear can still get into it if they get at it hard enough. So that's one issue that we still have to deal with. The other thing about relocation of bears, we do it, but I talked to Drake and the bear where a lot of them come back. This is where they're from. You're dropping somebody that's here to another area. They find their way back within 2 weeks sometime from being dropped further up in the interior. They know how to travel and where to go. They come back. So it's an issue. I do think, as Craig pointed out, I was going to mention the same thing, that we do seem to have a lot later this contract now, with especially up on, not so much my side, but in the upper high and that side, there seems to be a very late pickup for garbage. And I don't know why that is. You know, our green cans are out first thing in the morning, pretty much, I think, Craig, getting picked up pretty much right away. But I don't know why the garbage isn't picked up a lot earlier and quicker. If they're waiting for all the green can drivers to come back and use those, I don't know, but it needs to be adjusted in that area. That would be my thought. But a very good report, and I'm very pleased with the direction that we're going, and very pleased to hear that we get the certification for Bear Smart. Thank you. Good job.
Thank you. Richard?
Yeah, I was wondering, in the contract, I assume we had some requirement that they pick up earlier. We continue to get the complaints, and it's been mentioned, about the 7 p.m. Pickups, particularly the late afternoon pickups of green, particularly on Mondays. So are we going to get another truck, or how is the company managing that one thing? I recognize it's going to be more costly, although I suspect at this point that if they're running a truck from 6 till 7:30, they're paying overtime at this point. So I don't know how they could possibly find that cheaper than actually abiding by the contract. So.
As I mentioned, we have worked with them to add that one extra vehicle for now in our Monday and Tuesday zones, which are our most, our greatest bear activity areas. And we do note those other challenges, and we have some work to do with the contractor to see how we can expedite and make collection a little more, say, bear-friendly, maybe a little less bear-friendly.
So are they breaching the contract now?
In terms of collection times, they are not breaching the contract currently.
But they're barely making it in some cases.
That is correct.
So I'm at the point where I'm almost contemplating suggesting that we take the Monday and Tuesday and split them in half, so that, because there is no there are very few high priority routes on the Wednesday and Thursday, like there are on Monday and Tuesday. So there's nothing that they have to go to at 7 a.m. on Wednesday and Thursday. Can we contemplate, and I'm not asking that for today, but for, as we move forward, can we contemplate saying, okay, half of Burke Mountain and half of Cape Horn is Monday, and the other half of Burke Mountain and the other half, and half of Millardville, is Tuesday, because right now it's incredibly frustrating for residents who sit there and watch their green waste or garbage in the late afternoon. It's still and they put it out at 5 in the morning. So,
Mayor Stewart, if I may, we are nearing the first anniversary of the introduction of the new solid waste service contract. And as you know, initially we were focusing on a relatively smooth implementation of the new plan. And ever since, we've been working on customer complaints and similar, and we are working with the contractor to reduce the number of complaints and properly address the legitimate concerns of our residents. Now that the one-year anniversary is approaching, internally we just started a process where we are looking at bigger picture, such as what you mentioned, and what we can collectively do with the contractor. I anticipate that this process would take us to probably the end of summer, and then if we find some practical ways to improve the service, including the reduction of variation of the pickup time and so on and so forth, then we would certainly report back to Council, possibly as early as September. So it's definitely not forgotten. In fact, our focus is now shifting from the daily complaints to look at the bigger picture with the aim of finding a resolution with the contractor.
Okay, because we know that this is life and death. This is the ones that'll die are the bears. There was a fascinating discussion, I mentioned it to a couple of council members on social media about from residents up in Burke Mountain that were saying that on a holiday Monday there were a bunch of confused bears because they were there, it was Monday, and no one told them it was a holiday. And it's like there were 7 or 8 of them wandering around trying to find what's wrong here. And so the fact that they're that trained to feeding on garbage is, well, it's a death sentence, and we've got to wean them off of it. And I think, and so, last question: is it possible that we can consider the swamper that can unclip the green pails in certain areas on certain high-profile streets, like the streets that we get all the complaints on? Is it possible, next to High Creek, for example, that we ask those residents, leave your green can clipped, and we'll send the summer student out and we'll get them to unclip the stuff as the truck drives up the road?
Practically, yes, it is possible. The consequences are obviously added cost, and we would still face a period of time when the cans are out there on the curbside unlocked.
I mean, right, like 100 meters in front of the truck. Because there's no point unplugging. It's going to cost you the same to unclip them in the morning as it would cost you to unclip them 2 minutes before.
Well, I'd say off the top of my head that would be somewhat less practical, because
I'm not trying to design the system.
Yes.
There's something got to be done, because I don't want to see any more bears shot. Last point, and that is on the map. It says 2014 bear sightings. Now, this is actually a map of bear calls, and I want us to be careful how we use the words, because this isn't bear sightings. This is bear sightings that caused a call. That's right. There's no chance that in Cape Horn there's as many bear sightings as there are every day in Burke Mountain, but they no longer call because they're so used to having these bears in their neighborhood. So that's it.
Second mayor's point there, that clearly up in Burke Mountain, people see them and they just go by. And so unless they're causing a problem, they don't call in. The mayor made an interesting point. We had that discussion. He said that the bears seem to know that Monday morning is garbage morning on Burke Mountain. I responded, I wish my teenage son also knew that Monday morning is garbage morning. So the bears seem to have it down to a system up there. Councillor Towns.
Thank you for this good and informative report. I just want to touch on something different. About the rebranding, I had 2 opportunities just last week to, at the community garden opening and at the Teddy Bears picnic, the team was out with their tent, and the new board, I hadn't seen it yet, with the photos of all the wildlife in Coquitlam. They're beautiful photos. They're all, the bobcat, the cougar, the deer, the bears, the raccoons, and they're very, it draws you in. And from what I could see, there was a lot of people stopping by the tent, talking to Drake and the other staff. And I overheard quite a bit, even at the Teddy Bear picnic yesterday. And they were educating. So I just want to say kudos to the team with the really good materials that you have at these tents with the community outreach. I think slowly we're educating residents more and more at every community event. So thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments? The report has been moved and seconded. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Item 8. No, that was 7. We're only on item 8. I'll just point out going on to 7. Well, in which case I'll point it to committee that we're only halfway through a big agenda. So we're
It's the chair's fault.
The chair is trying. Okay.
Very trying.
Item 7 is the 2014 annual drinking water quality report. It's before you for information.
Second.
Any discussion? Yes. Questions from Councilor Zarella?
I just had a question about the message from the medical health officer. Do we get that every year?
Yes, we do.
Yep. Just wanted to find out. Thank you.
And the HAA concentration, there's a general description of it as being slightly above Health Canada guidelines. Health Canada guideline is 0.08 milligrams per liter. How far above that are we here? Which for the haloacidic acids?
Depending on which quarter we are looking at, but the data going back to the first quarter result of 2015 is 71 for the running average.
What, 71?
71 lower than the minimum, but in 2014, which the report is for, we had two readings which were 96 and 94 respectively, so slightly higher than the...
Health Canada is 0.08 milligrams a liter. What numbers
I'm sorry, 0.094.
0.0, okay.
Yeah, sorry, I ignored all those zeros
Okay,
before.
so that is just quite marginal.
It's absolutely marginal.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Okay, like 96 compared to 0.08. That's not marginal.
No.
Moved and seconded. No further discussion. All in favor? Any opposed? It's carried. Moving on.
Item 8 concerns signalized T intersection safety review. We have a presentation by the Parsons Consulting Group, and the report's before you for information.
Okay, welcome. Great.
Council, we are presenting you the findings of a consultant study analyzing T intersections in the city of Coquitlam and adjacent municipalities. You recall that last year we had a tragic motor vehicle accident, and in part stemming from that accident, and in part as we determined the need to look for options to improve generally the configuration and operation of the intersections, we engaged Parsons, consulting engineers, and I'd like to very briefly introduce Tim Murphy from Parsons. You may recall many years ago, Tim Murphy was working for the city of Coquitlam for a fair number of years, and he was looking after traffic and traffic operations in the city. So certainly we couldn't find a better consultant who knows both the local conditions as well as the related issues. Tim has about a 10-minute long presentation for us on the findings and recommendations of the report. And if he goes over 10 minutes, I will pull the microphone away from him.
We may try to get it to 8.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Who's controlling the slide?
You are.
You are.
Yeah?
That's full. Yes.
Where am I pointing?
You don't have to point to anything.
Okay. So we had the pleasure of being retained by the City of Coquitlam, City of Port Moody, and City of Port Coquitlam and ICBC to conduct a road safety engineering study of signalized T intersections. The Coquitlam engineering staff led the project and provided the project management for conducting the study. We looked at 76 signalized intersections in the 3 municipalities, all signalized T intersections, of which there was 47 in Coquitlam. We conducted a literature review of studies that had been done for signalized intersections in North America and found some key documents. We did a jurisdictional survey of local municipalities in BC, a limited one of 5 jurisdictions that the project team knew had been doing some things that were innovative or had been involved in ICBC road safety engineering programs in the past. We did a screening of the 76 signalized intersections, looking at them for a variety of different safety performance measures. And from that, the project steering committee selected 16. Of the 16, we did a detailed in-service review of those intersections, looking at issues and solutions, and from that we developed a safety toolbox. What we found was when you looked at intersections, this one is Johnson north of David Avenue, that there was key issues were usually to do with operational performance. There was congestion, site design characteristics such as very wide roads or wide lanes or road width, how the right turns and left turns were treated. Could the pedestrians at the intersection be seen? Could the traffic control devices or the road markings at the intersections be seen? And how were accesses controlled? You can see in this picture, the Jeep in the picture is actually coming out of a driveway, and he seems to think he has a right-of-way. And the cars coming down the hill, they definitely have the right-of-way.
but the vehicles turning right, they also think they have the right of way. So if you're a pedestrian trying to cross there, it could be very complex. In the safety toolbox, we were able to identify 21 measures in all. They're grouped in intersection design measures, how you'd actually change the physical configuration of the intersection to make it safer for pedestrians, and traffic signal measures, either changing the design of the signal or changing how it operates to make it safer for pedestrians. To be brief, we're just going to highlight 5 of them. One was corner bulges, or wide roads that had parking lanes on each side, bringing in a corner bulge so that the exposure of the pedestrian on the road is reduced. They can't get run over if they're not standing on the pavement. And it also brings them out so they can be seen by the traffic that's approaching them from the parked cars. Locally, it's been known to have a 30 to 50% reduction in pedestrian crashes. The other is a smart channel right turn. You can see the intersection on the left shows a typical 45-degree angle right turn lane. A vehicle can enter at high speeds, and as they approach the merge point, might be traveling at high speeds. They tend to be looking to the left to see if there's a vehicle that's going to conflict with them, and don't pay much attention to the pedestrian who's trying to step off onto the sidewalk to cross in the right turn lane. By changing the angle to make it more of a stop condition, it means the vehicles know they're going to have to stop when they get to the end, so they're going slower. They have a better sight line coming in. And for elderly motorists, it's easier for them to turn their head to once they get there to see if there's a conflicting vehicle. They're not going in at 45 degrees. And it has been shown to reduce rear-end crashes by 50% and merging crashes by 40%, and also be safer for pedestrians. This is the leading pedestrian interval. It's been used in Coquitlam for about a year at 2 locations, and also in Surrey and Richmond. You can see in the picture the pedestrians waiting to cross, and the light is red. The cross-street traffic light is also red, so the intersection is completely red, but the pedestrian phase is on. The pedestrian gets a head start, gets to establish their presence on the road before other vehicles are allowed to enter the intersection. So it is a safety improvement. It's fairly new. We don't have any good before and after statistically rigorous studies done locally. But in the United States, it's been known to reduce pedestrian crashes involving left-turn vehicles by 59%. So that's very promising. The 2-stage crosswalk, you can see the upper diagram shows the median in the road, and the crosswalk is staggered. There's a diagonal connection between the two. The picture in the bottom is the same, but in the median, there is a 90-degree change of direction for the pedestrians to cross. They are both used. They're very successful in mid-block crossings. They also can be used at signalized intersection crossings. They're very effective for very wide roads like Pine Tree Way or Johnson Street, where you have a lot of lanes and you have elderly pedestrians in the vicinity trying to cross a very wide road. This is one we developed just during the course of this study, vertical separation of signal heads. When you look at the picture on the top, as a motorist is approaching the intersection, they can see the secondary signal heads on, and they can see that the pedestrian head might be on and flashing, or they don't walk flashing. But just as the vehicle moves into the intersection, just before they're about to make that left turn, the pedestrian head gets hidden by the vehicle head. So they no longer have that physical cue of flashing lights in front of them telling them that there's a pedestrian there, and they make their turn. So the solution is to separate those heads in such a way that both heads can be seen in the future, and that the motorists can still see that pedestrian head activity and know that there's a pedestrian in the crosswalk, even if they don't see them at the time they're making their decision. So in summary, that was the study in a nutshell. We did the literature review, the environmental scan. We looked at 16 intersections that were selected by the committee in the 3 municipalities in great detail. We developed a road safety toolbox that the traffic engineering staff could use these measures to address different pedestrian safety issues at signalized T intersections. They still require engineering judgment. They might not work in every specific situation, but certainly some of them will be applicable. And some of them are very new, not really been used in this part of North America before. And so for those, they'll have to try them and monitor them to see how successful they are. And that was the assignment.
Great, thank you. Questions? Richard?
Yeah, I view this as one of the most important things we'll be dealing with today, because this one is life and death for residents. How do we, what kind of analysis has been done in other jurisdictions, obviously before and after, and I'll start there. You mentioned a significant reduction. That kind of reduction, is it relates to curb bulges, or is it, like I see the reduction numbers for curb bulges? There's some. It's not universally accepted, the curb bulge as a great innovation, but I think it is. And so, what kind of numbers can we see from other jurisdictions on each one of these sorts of improvements?
Okay, that is a good measure. And for road safety measures, traffic engineers in North America, we set guidelines as what would be an acceptable before and after study. It has to be statistically rigorous. So if you're doing a study in Coquitlam of a location that's looking at before and after, that's your treatment site. We also want to know a nearby control site, how did that perform? Because did crashes just go up and down because travel went up and down, because the economy went up and down, or did it actually change in relation to other sites that were untreated? And those kinds of studies then are documented. They're voluntarily put into crash modification measure warehouse, which all road safety engineers can access. So, but when a measure is very new, that hasn't been established. So a few of the measures that we've identified are very new. One measure had animated eyes, that when the walk signal comes up, little animated eyes go back and forth to remind the pedestrians, you gotta still look left and right, you can't just go. So that is brand new, and there's not been applied enough that there are studies done yet. So for those ones, the studies will happen, and Coquitlam Engineering will do their share of those kinds of studies and offer that information into the general traffic engineering community, and other communities will be doing the same, and they'll all benefit from that. To know, it's helpful when you apply to ICBC for funding that they have also done these kinds of examinations of safety control measures to know which ones they were prepared to fund.
Okay, and I had several others, but I'll quickly ask my last one. Are there any measures that can pull the earbuds out of people's ears as they're walking down the road? Can we get the pedestrian? So in Nanaimo, for example, that eye thing was actually stamped on the stamped concrete, saying "look both ways" as you're entering this crosswalk. I don't know the effectiveness of those kinds of initiatives. I assume that in school zones it might not be more effective. But how do we get the pedestrian to be part of the solution, as well as engineering? Obviously, engineering is going to be a big part of it, but I want the pedestrian to play a role here too.
Yeah, I'll say that majority of crashes are caused by human error. That's pretty well known. But often when that happens, council asks engineering to go do something. And so engineering, road safety engineering uses measures that do make a difference, but it doesn't mean that someone couldn't still make an error. They could be wearing a listening device on their head and not paying attention and step out on the road. They could be an elderly person who is somehow disoriented and not sure what they're doing and steps on the road. Those can happen, but with engineering measures you try to minimize the occurrence of that, and should it happen, reduce the severity of the incident by having motorists slow down, by having giving every opportunity for motorists to pay attention, that they could see the device, they could see the road markings, they could see the pedestrians, and you're relying on them to stop, even though the pedestrian did the wrong thing.
Thank you. Frank.
Just a couple of things over to Joseph and the study here. When I looked at the table of the intersections done, you have Pine Tree and Anson, but isn't Pine Tree and Anson going to be a full intersection in the near future? It won't be a T intersection.
Yes, it's going to be a four-legged intersection very soon.
Okay, so I just wondering why it was included, because it won't be.
Because up to data.
Just data?
Yes.
So the other question comes, because you raised it, is at that intersection being a very wide road, is engineering look at doing that staggered crosswalk, the 90-degree, at that location?
Not at this point.
Will it be something you will consider to take a look at with the design, since it seems like a good way of dealing with crossing safety?
Through the chair, it's not currently part of the Pine Tree Way enhancement projects, and because we're adding the fourth leg, we're going to be creating a northbound left turn lane. So the residual median in that area is going to be quite narrow.
Okay.
And you need more of a Guilford Way 4 or 5 meter wide median in order to provide that
landing area?
The landing area, the area where you would actually store pedestrians going in both directions in that central refuge area, and there just wouldn't be enough room left at that particular location.
Thank you. Yep. The other question I have was up in the Burke Mountain. I raised it earlier, is about corner bulges and the parking up to the corner bulge. And we've had this issue up there where when you're the car trying to pull out into traffic without pedestrians, you can't see the traffic coming down the road from your left-hand side. So there needs to be a look at, when we put in corner bulges, to restrict parking back so the car exiting, I didn't see on the road, because I've done with Joseph right now, Craig was there, we've gone through the discussion where you have corner bulges now, and we have parking right up to the corner bulge, and I've experienced this a number of times. You come up, you can't see that traffic coming this way. So that's another thing, when you look at your corner bulge, you're going to have to look at that sight line and moving parking back. And they lose some parking or extending the curb bulge, I think in some of our designs, further down to create that visible area, because that's one danger that's out there in a bunch of areas right now that we need to deal with. Okay? The last point I want to point out is I drive professionally, and I think taking off what Mayor Stewart said is pedestrians don't follow the rules. And the one problem is pedestrians think that as long as they're walking to the sidewalk, even though it just says don't walk, that they have the right of way. And a lot of accidents have where people, when you're looking across to see if anybody's coming, and it's all don't walk, it's almost done, you're now going to pull the right turn, that people step into that. So part of the education, I think, how do we get people getting their earbuds out, getting their iPhones, and looking up to see where they're walking and going, but also for people to realize it's part of their responsibility to make the intersection safe.
Okay. Thank you. Chris.
Thanks. I really like the countdown signs, the walk signs with the countdown numbers, and I think they're probably, like you're saying here, pretty effective. Have we, or any data on the effectiveness of making those lights larger, the walking light and the stop hand light? I'm thinking that the intersection that Joseph talked about, the Gaydensbury and Austin. I mean, cars are coming down the hill, they're not really paying attention. But if there was a flashing walk light larger, it might just be enough to grab their attention, make them think twice. I don't know. Has that ever been considered?
Well, the size is usually regulated by provincial and state acts, and then for the benefit of manufacturers, they're all made the same size. So once that's done, they're all the same size. There has been experiments of putting the yellow backboard that's put around the vehicle heads. It's also maybe putting them around the pedestrian head to make it stand out, be more visible. But the actual size of the light is regulated.
Would there be anything stopping us from putting a separate on the light post, pedestrian crossing flashing light that would be timed with the walk signal?
Well, we weren't trying to invent anything beyond using the controls the way they're the standards for their design. We weren't, because the novelty of some things then wears off, and then what about all the other signals that we don't put that flashing light on? What does that mean? So we stayed with the standards that are used. We're just applying them. And any new standards that have been developed in North America, we did research to identify those as well and apply them. But we didn't invent anything new on the devices.
So anything kind of creative or out of the box we're not looking at because it's not a standard application.
The positioning of the heads is, that's only been done here as a measure. It's seeing that when we're out there looking at the intersection, realizing that the pedestrian heads were hidden at the moment the motorist was making the turn. But that is the standard for the design of traffic signals. So we're adjusting that design slightly to make sure that motorists get the maximum benefit if the lights are in fact activated and that they should see them.
And that makes total sense. I mean, I can't understand why you would hide it behind the light. So I guess my only other comment would be, in the report, it sounds like this is going to be a phased-in approach. And I agree with Mayor Stewart. Anytime there's a potential life at risk, I think we need to do what we can. So I would be in favor of if we need to borrow money if the money's not, allocated, to try to get some of these improvements done sooner rather than later, assuming we have the capacity to do the work. But for us to prolong it over 2 or 3 years because it's not in the budget right now, I think is not something I'd like to consider.
Is it a budget issue, or is it just that you need to review it as you install it, or is it implementation more than budget?
There is an element of the budget issue, but I think the critical path is staff resources. And whenever you touch anything in traffic operations, there's a huge liability. So we certainly cannot rush into this. We have to make sure that we set our priorities right, and wherever we implement changes, we do it right. So it's not just the money.
Dan?
Just through the chair, I'd just like to add a number of the toolbox items that have been identified are operational, things like repainting markings and making markings brighter, that we'll implement into our regular program as we repaint intersections this summer. We've also, we believe, got sufficient funding through the 2014 surplus allocation. The $500,000 that was allocated will provide us with a very good funding source to make the initial investments into what we believe are the low-lying fruit and the proven items that have been identified by the report. Also, the report will provide us with some opportunities to secure funding, we believe, from ICBC because of the proven track record of some of the better known aspects. So I think the funding is in very good condition for the coming year. We appreciate the support.
Thank you. Any further questions? Good. Okay, motion to accept the recommendations. Councilor Marsden, second. Councilor Towner, all in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. It's carried. Mr. Clerk, next item.
Next item, item 9, is Booth Farm update and garage demolition. This item was deferred from our last meeting on June 1st, and it remains before you for information.
Move proceed.
Second.
Okay. Moved by Councilor O'Neill, seconded Councilor Marsden. Okay. Was there, just before we start, I know that some went for the tour. Is there new information and numbers? Were you able to get those, or is this something we should defer until we have the information, or some more for discussions?
Through the chair, there is new information in accordance with what council requested from the minutes of the last meeting. We were basically directed to provide back to the committee supplementary information related to how the building code provisions will apply for any proposed modifications to the garage. And I believe at the actual tour there was a request to for some modifications and to provide costing on those kind of modifications that were discussed.
And you have that information?
Yes.
Quick turnaround. Thank you. Okay.
If I can, Mr. Chair, just because not all of council members were there, it was obviously short notice. We did have to have a specific time because the site is secure. So I know a number of council members were there. What was discussed at the time, we did go into the building. There's two components within the building. There's one, probably 2/3 of the building on the east, and there's 1/3 of the building on the west. The question that was discussed with council members that were present was the possibility of deferring a decision on this building, notwithstanding the report. If this building were to be retained and the decision to demolish deferred, what could be done minimally to leave the building up, securing the building as minimally needed, essentially mothballing most of the building, so 2/3 of the building, the easterly portion would remain secured, they'd be probably closed off, and then the westerly portion could actually be sheathed and a garage door put on that part of the building, and that could be used as the park's operation storage that is needed for the occupation. So that was discussed openly with council members, and the question was, under that option, what would be the cost? I did make, certainly, I was there, and I made it clear to council that was there that the park occupation was entirely needed simply to have a presence on the property and to ensure that the Booth Farm building is retained. There was never any intent to have the park occupation drive the demolition for this building. The storage for that park occupation could be done within a storage unit that could be placed elsewhere on the property if needed. So I just want to make that point clear. So we have communicated to the SI team that were there around this alternate option. If council were to defer to this, it would simply be mothballing the building. A portion of the building could be utilized by the parks team through the back, and then the building stays up and is secured. That was what was discussed at the site meeting about a week ago, or a few days ago.
And did we get a cost for that?
Yes, through the chair. The cost of materials, which would be plywood, 2x4s, other materials that would be required, about $4,000 or $5,000, and then labor would probably be.
Must be expensive nails.
Labor would be another equivalent of $4,000 or $5,000 on top of that.
And we're getting about $10,000 to bring the half the building up.
We think that'll be maximum.
Richard.
I'm sorry, we had a conversation with the carpenter on site, and he concurred that we're talking about 15 sheets of plywood and 20 studs, and that's expensive lumber. So I'm setting that aside, and a couple of days to deal with the roof, and a couple of days to strap the wall. So quite frankly, I'm surprised. I'm disappointed that we're having to spend this much time on it, and I really don't have enough stake in this particular building. I just think that bringing it back to secure was probably, in my position, a better option. We ended up with a 10 by 20 secure storage area, which was the goal, actually, and then the building was retained for a decision that could be made later as to whether or not it had value in the future of the site. So I was pleased that we were able to get into it. From the inside, it was exactly as I had anticipated it would be. It was a sagged hip, which happens when you remove ceiling joists, which I guess happened when we, at some point when the building was, when a loft was added in the garage. The carpenter concurred that it was a simple matter of trying to re-secure the two top plates so that the one bulge on the north face was unbulged, and the ridge went up, and away we went. Now, this is not a long-term solution. Obviously, this is simply a means of making it so the building is secure and safe and structurally sound. It doesn't meet today's code, but neither does the house, and there is no requirement that it meet today's code for storage. So the $5,000 in materials, I think would, it seems a little much. It seems like we could rebuild it for that, but it includes the garage door. Yeah. I would say that, and I don't. Okay, so that's so I'm pleased that we went to see it.
Well, thank you. I wasn't here for the debate last time, and I was out at there, and I looked at it. I don't know if we need to save it or we can save it. My question is, I'm surprised we were at the meeting there. We talked to the carpenter a bunch of that we were looking at labor and everything included about $4,000, maybe $5,000. That was the discussion that we were having at that time. And now I don't know if you're paying for a garage door on that. If you're paying $3,000, $4,000 for a garage door, because I just did some work on my house, bought a sheet of plywood. It was under $100 for a 3/4 inch sheet of plywood. And you're not going to be using, you may only need a 1/2 inch sheet of plywood, it's even cheaper. So, as just going off with Mayor Stewart, I'm shocked to see the labor and everything being that much. What was your pricing on a garage door for this? Because the garage door is only for the one area of the 1/3 for storage of stuff.
It is, through the chair, it is a double garage door, and it is the minimally.
Double? It'd be a single. Right?
It's a 8-foot wide.
It's a single.
Sorry, go ahead.
Thank you. Through the chair. The door would be more than a man door. We call it a double door. It's a large single door. It has to be very secure. We're going to have parts, equipments in there. It was determined that a sheet of plywood probably wouldn't hold back anybody from wanting to break in. Included in that is any electrical services that we may need. We're going to run something from the house. We want to know what Parks and Rec will require for electrical within. Are they charging things? To mothball the other 2/3, we still have to make sure that we secure the roof so it doesn't take down the 1/3 that we do want to use. As far as the labor component, it's 2 people, minimum 3 days. If it runs into 5 days, we're at $4,000 right there. We're not saying it will be, but it could be.
Yeah. I mean, running power in there, and I think I won't speak for Richard, but that wasn't our intent. And I think if you needed power in there, there's an electrical cord from the building into there that could suffice for that. All Richard was trying to point, and I backed off because I don't know if it's worth saving or not. But the issue was, can we just do the minimal amount? And if somebody breaks in there, we're not trying to make a Fort Knox that nobody can get into there. We're not trying to make it a commercial garage door. We're just trying to simply, because the other question I have through to Raul, if we were to tear it down, and you what's the cost of building a shed and doing all the work to put a shed on this? So what's the
I think the report identified a container that we would purchase, and that structure could be reused by the city in other purposes. So the idea was that, and I don't recall the cost of it. Yeah. $4,000. So and that cost would be something the city invests in, and that would be reused elsewhere. So that was one of the benefits that the city would have. From our perspective, again, we're certainly not driving the issue of power, but certainly security has to be normal security. We do rely on our partners in SI to give us reasonable costs, and we're comfortable that those costs reflect are the city's costs. But the area would simply be storing, I think, 2 or 3 machines, and as long as it's a secure area, and really there's a window there right now that's boarded up. We don't even need that window reestablished. So we would live with the minimal. It really isn't an occupation. It's simply a place where it's a garage, it's a utility structure. People go in and pull the machine out, put it back in, and that's the base on which the costs have been identified.
A lot of money to temporarily secure it.
I'm struggling with this because I don't want to tear down a building that could have some use in the future, because we don't know what the site plan is going to be. But nor do I want to put $10,000 into a building that I don't know I'm going to use in the future. So it's,
right.
I'm caught. Sorry, I thought you were...
No, I had one last.
Oh, sorry. Okay. I had myself next.
Okay. My question comes down to this. Even if so you need storage on there for certain equipment. So our choices are either leave it up or take it down, because there's nowhere else to put storage or put a shed in there. Because I was looking at, the building's not going to fall down. And is it going to be a year or 2 years before we get an idea on what we will scope out for the Booth Farm? So it's a few years down the road.
Yes.
It's not immediate. So it's a couple of years down the road.
Correct.
That makes my decision a little bit better. That helps. Yeah. Thanks.
So as I'm saying, with one of these, I don't want to spend money on something that we don't know we're going to use, but nor do I want to take something down, not knowing that because once it's gone, it's gone. So similar to what Brent was saying, is that at this point is our best option just to mothball it, cross our fingers, board it up, and then put something next to it. So we haven't put money into a building we may knock down, and we haven't knocked down something we may want to save. So it's at this point the best option just to spend the money on the trailer, put it next door, and then just delay this decision until we know what the use of the property is.
I have a question.
That was my question, then I've got Richard, and then I'll go to Dennis, and then I've got you.
No, that's not
Okay. Are we back to the sort of status quo?
No, I should clarify the comment. So you're, sorry, through the chair. So you're saying do nothing to the existing building and just simply bring a storage container? Because the existing building has issues, and we need to address the issues on the existing building.
Do those issues exist if we don't go into it? If we just board it up and we don't have staff in there, do those issues still exist?
that's something I would have to talk to the building division.
Through the chair, the issues still exist, but having said that, there's all kinds of buildings, as we can see in city center, that are boarded up. And they're boarded up for, usually by the landlord, to prevent break-ins and public safety. They do not necessarily comply structurally. They obviously don't comply with building code. We would just board the building up, as you suggested, for public safety, and that's it. If the thing falls down, it's not hurting anybody because we prevented people from going in there. Having said that, there's still a risk to the city if people do break in, and we just go in and fix it again, and that's just ongoing, like we would do any other building. So.
So one of the things that frustrates me is when we don't compare apples to apples. So in the original report it says, and I hate dealing with this on this finite level, but it frustrates the hell out of me. The cost for demolition is estimated to be $3,500. It's top of page 3, and the purchase of the container is estimated to be $4,000. So that's the cost. The cost of getting a container in and demolishing the building is $7,500. You don't need lighting because you don't want lighting. But as soon as we say, well, let's see if we can use this building for the container, we need to throw in $5,000 to $10,000 depending on the level of electrical and lighting improvements required. Well, we didn't need lighting if it was a container that's 10 by 20, but if it's a 10 by 20 garage, that's just we need to throw in $5,000 or $10,000 worth of lighting and electrical. So let's compare apples to apples. And so it is my frustration that we seem to be intent on tearing the building down and bringing in a different building. It'll be a steel building, and using it when the folks on site agreed that, okay, we can firm this building up and build the storage we need out of by sheathing the interior walls. It'll be as secure. I didn't realize what you meant by double garage door was a double man door, not a garage door. Every discussion on site was that it would be a garage door, but either way, it's a $1,500 door. But we don't need lighting, so let's stop talking about electricity in this building. If we're going to be making a decision, it's going to be a non-electrified strengthening up of the building to make it secure, and then assembling that room that we need. And the cost of that sounds like about the same as the cost of the other option. And then we have all of our options still available to us, depending on what the future plan says about a building that actually it fits in well with the site. And I don't know whether we'd ever be able to use it. I don't know, but we haven't made that decision yet. And tearing it down now, and then 3 years from now saying, okay, well, too bad we don't have that building anymore, but we've got this nice container. So I'm still going to be supportive of the idea that we spend the $7,000 on making the building proper.
Dennis, thanks. I wasn't available to get out and look at it firsthand. I'm relying on some of the information, and I appreciate Rob taking the time to speak to me at one of the events we were at in regards to what's there. This, to me, comes down to just straight dollar and cents, and I agree with Richard. I don't want to have to deal on at this granular level. I really don't think we need to be here, but we're looking total cost for a demolition and a shed, a steel shed that has long-term life and use for the city. Total cost about $7,500 versus spending $8,000 to $10,000. Let's call it $8,000 to bring this up to use it now, and knowing that the long-term. Well, no, the numbers are 8 to 10. So that's the numbers. So we've got 8 to 10 grand for something that's got a few years left in it, maybe, and until a decision is made. And at that point in time, the decision, since there's no historic value to this, is probably that there isn't a need for it. So it's not programmable space, and now we're talking about just fixing about 1/3 of the structure that's there. So to look and spend $8,000 now on it, knowing you're probably going to have another $3,500 in demolition in 2 or 3 years when you decide what to do, it's cheaper to act now versus move forward. Not even getting into the potential liability if something were to happen to the structure while staff are on site, or liability of somebody breaking in and collapsing on them, or somebody being hurt in a storm, whatever it might be. I think the prudent decision is to move forward and put something that actually has life force for the next 15 to 20 years in the sill shed. So, thanks.
Any further discussion? Okay, so the recommendation is to receive the report, but in the report, it says that staff is going to take down the building. So I suppose that in that fact, by receiving the report, we're acknowledging that the building is coming down.
I move that an amendment that we ask staff to move forward with strengthening the building and securing a space for the storage instead of the container.
I'll second that.
Can I ask one clarifying question?
Sure, before I'm going to ask a procedural question. Can that be accepted as an amendment because it really changes the direction of the motion that's on
I think because the motion before you has a definite outcome, and it's just to receive. Although there's a implied motion, I think you could vote against this, but we're left back at square one if not where we are. So I think this is clarifying in order to vote on this, that it gets you to the next stage.
the motion before us? Okay, speaking order on the motion, Chris first.
Just wanted to clarify. We basically said that no matter what we decide to do with this property, we will never use that garage for a long-term use, correct? So even if we wanted to have a little pottery studio the exact same size as that garage, we would tear it down and rebuild it anyways.
Yep. All right.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify
Yep.
that.
Okay, so
Okay, then I have Terry, then I have May.
Okay, so when I left the tour, my thoughts were we shouldn't do anything until we know exactly what we're doing with the property. So I'm thinking if we tear it down and get a cement container, and then years down the road we have a community garden there, and we need a shed for tools and stuff. That concrete or the steel container that we bought wouldn't be used for that, would it? We'd probably end up building a shed. So are you saying we would never use this current garage as that potentially future community gardening shed? We wouldn't use it at all.
A garden shed or a utility structure would never be this size in all likelihood, and what you'd have to do to the building to improve it and to modify it for a full public occupancy for a programmable space we would never do that. Simply for a utility shed, it's unlikely we would encumber this size of a park site with simply utility, like somewhere we just put tools. My own opinion would be that it's very unlikely. I'm quite supportive of council seeking to defer a decision, but if we look at the size of the building, the cost of land, where it's positioned, where the house is, and if it's simply for a small utility place where we can put tools to pots and other implements for the garden, it's unlikely we would renovate the space in order to do that. The cost would be exorbitant. And if you just look at the quality and the state of the building, and it really isn't a heritage building. That really is an underlying factor for us. But I understand council's position. But really, my own opinion would be that it would not be likely that we would encumber this amount of land, valuable land, with a building of this size simply for a storage.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, the motion?
I can reread it.
You can read back
The motion put forward by Mayor Stewart and seconded by Councillor Reid is to move forward with strengthening the building and securing the space needed for storage.
Okay, all in favor of the motion? Okay, Councillor Zerillo, Councillor Stewart, Councillor Reid, and myself. All opposed? Councillor Asmussen, Councillor O'Neill, Councillor Towder, Councillor Wilson, and Councillor Marston, so the motion fails. Okay, moving to the recommendation.
The recommendation has been moved by Councillor O'Neill.
Has been seconded. All in favor of the recommendation? Okay, all opposed? Opposed is Councillor Zerillo, myself, and
Richard?
Councillor Reid.
I'm not opposed to receiving.
Oh, I am, because it is something we do. Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, the motion to receive carries.
And then we have Mayor Stewart voting in favor of that motion.
Never buy another heritage site that has an adjacent building.
Okay.
This is a motion to receive the staff report.
Which has an outcome attached to it.
Okay, you're right. I'm opposed. You're right. Sorry.
Okay.
Let the record show.
Okay.
Take pictures.
Moving on. Mr. Clerk.
Moving on, item 10 is a facility condition assessment update from May 2015. It's for you for information.
I move receipt.
Second. Second by Councillor Espenson. The questions, comments?
Through the chair, the assets that are managed by strategic initiatives are obviously quite different than the assets managed by the engineering department. I mean, pipes and sewer and that sort of thing. But nevertheless, they're still assets, and they perform a different role, different function. And as it says in the report, I mean, it's pretty self-evident that our responsibility is to make sure these assets are maintained and preserved, and for the longevity is and to create optimize as much value as we can from the assets. So this report is designed. I'm not sure in the past how much information council has received from staff with respect to assets, but this report is strictly designed for information to council to ensure you're fully informed of what assets we do have. Council should know that, and what staff is doing with respect to managing the assets, and it's an opportunity to just check in and provide comment, and it's also providing council with some information as best as we can forecast over the next few years of where the costing with respect to maintaining and preserving these assets will be. So that's where we're at, and we're here to available to answer any questions you may have with respect to this.
I have Councillor Marsden and then Councillor Serv.
Just quickly, thank you very much. Page 3 reflects the fact that we've got a number of facilities that are at or approaching their end of their economic life cycle. And on there, I was kind of surprised to see two. One was the Town Center Fire Hall.
Yeah.
And the second was the Town Center Fire Hall portable structure. So two-part question. Can you shed some light on the age of the Town Center Fire Hall and where it is in approaching the end of life cycle? And on the portable structure, is that not the same one that we approved budget for to replace this year?
I can't, through the chair, I cannot give you the exact date on the original structure, but that is the actual apparatus bays that we're talking about. It is an older one that we want to do some significant work on. As for the portable structure, it's a training trailer. It's quite a large ATCO trailer in the back there.
So we funded the replacement of that this year in budget discussions, did we not? Okay.
Through the chair, yes, we did. That was funded through the budget this year.
Okay.
So that doesn't need to be on there.
Okay. So what is the age of the fire hall, Town Center Fire Hall?
No, I don't know. I'd have to find out. I can't recall.
Late 80s. Yeah.
Mid-80s.
It was just before we hosted the games across the street. It was just before
So
we
we're looking
hosted
maybe 30 years old.
the 91 games. Yeah.
So it's maybe 30 years old. And the life cycle of that seems short life cycle for a structure of that. And we earlier heard that we're looking at 60 years for most of our buildings.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. That's concerning for me. Hopefully we can have some more information at some point on that with regards to its actual age and the timeline. Because I see that. I look at the other part of the report.
Yeah.
I look and hear what we spent just putting a new fire hall in Burke Mountain, and I envision when I see end of economic life, I'm thinking, okay, what do we have in store for us? So if I could get a little bit more insight and timeline on that, I'd greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Zarrillo.
Well, thank you so much for this. I know, Perry, this is a fairly new department for you, so this is a great thing to have, just an asset list of what are we starting with. And I have to say, I'm sure you were surprised too, as much as I was, just to see how many of our facilities haven't been maintained adequately over the years. And so I would ask that, don't be afraid to ask for the budget next year to make sure, because it's like a car. When you crash your car, it may only be worth a few $1,000s to ICBC, but it's worth the world to you. And I think that's the same with these buildings. We can't be replacing these buildings. So I'm open to your department asking for budget so that we can keep better maintenance of our buildings. Number 2 was just on page 6. It talked about Place Millardville, and I was concerned to see the sentence that we need the $800,000 if we don't replace in 5 or 10 years. I'm of the mind that we are replacing in the next 5 years, Place Millardville. So I just wanted to point that out, that I'm not on board with spending the $800,000 if it means we're not replacing in the next 5 years with Place Millardville. But thank you for the work on this, and don't be afraid to ask for the budget, because those buildings are worth more to keep them maintained properly.
Okay, thank you. Similar question on just looking on page 5, a number of these buildings here, certainly again, I was going to raise a question, let them done. Scout Hall, Poirier Community Center. The Community Center, that's the admin building, that's the one on the north corner. What is?
No, that's the community center.
Community Center.
Adjacent to Centennial Pavilion.
What's attached to?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So it doesn't even list the what do we refer to the one at the north end that's rented out to the old administration?
Yeah, they have that in here too.
The Poirier Administration Building is.
But it's not listed on this.
It's at the end of it.
No, we're doing some work on it this year.
Okay. Yeah. So okay. So it's listed over on this page, and this thing is actually being having work done now.
Yes.
Which leads to my point is some of these buildings are really close to their end of life, such as that building and Scout Hall. And I mean, at some point, we just spent all this discussion about how much money do we put into a shed. Now we're talking really big numbers on some of these things, and is it time to really sort of say, no, we've got to get them onto the capital plan or take them down?
Through the chair, those are some hard decisions that are going to have to be made by council over the next few years. That's why we're flagging this and giving you guys a heads up.
Particularly the administration bill. I keep hearing, it's going to come down within the next year or two, and I'm just sort of wondering. I mean, I think even putting any money into it.
We're trying to make it continue as long as we can until decisions are made. And
even asbestos. Okay. Next, Nate.
I want to have a report on the town center fire hall, when it was built, and what was the life expectancy of it. I bet Sheena could probably tell us. But for you to tell me that that's in the same condition as the Blue Mountain waiting pool, I'm having a little difficulty with this. So,
yeah.
The Blue Mountain waiting pool is no longer, I guess, as of this year. Is that correct? So it's gone.
No.
Waiting pool? I thought you were getting rid of the waiting pool.
No. The waiting pool, sorry, I don't have the microphone, but...
No, the Blue Mountain waiting pool, we've just redone the Blue Mountain Spray Park. The waiting pool is in operation. It's will continue as such, and it is planned in our aquatic infrastructure strategy to ultimately be replaced with an enhanced facility. But there is no what all this means is that we're not going to be putting a lot of money.
This year or next year?
No.
The waiting pool?
No.
Okay, I thought it was. And the Poirier Administration Building, I get that one. But the Town Center Fire Hall, boy, I'll tell you, if I'm building buildings of that expense, and they're not lasting me more than 25 years, I've got a problem. So I would like to have that report back.
Yep.
Okay. Richard.
Exactly the same comment on the town center fire hall. It would have been an interesting thing to contemplate that in the context of the addition we just did to it. I'm not sure we would have added to it if we'd have known that we're rebuilding the rest of it, and I'm not confident that we're rebuilding the rest of it. I look at this list of, I'm going to go down this list. Where we're at here, Place des Arts. What kind of repairs are required to the interior of Place des Arts?
What page are we on? On page 4.
Page 4. Second from the bottom. Second from the bottom of the table.
Place des Arts were basically redoing all of the wall surfaces. We're taking all their artwork off. We're repairing all the walls, all the holes, repainting some drywall, gyprock, more than just a refresh of the entire interior.
But it's 6 figures for drywall and painting. That's more than it cost when we originally drywalled it. So anyway, I recognize that the walls that are there now are meant to be forgiving of nails, so that and it was never sealed and it never vented, so that you ended up with each nail hole then produced a stack effect vent, and it created a dark spot around the nail hole. But I'm having trouble with 6 figures on that one. The town center field house. I'm having trouble with the numbers. The Spaney pool, the concrete floor renewal and roof repairs and renewal for $200,000 or $175,000. Concrete floor, that's not the pool tank. That's actually the
No, it's all of the decking and the interior.
All of the decking.
The outside decking, not the tank. There's some repairs required there. All of the flooring in the buildings is going to be stripped and repaired, and with a similar surface that went into Eagle Ridge. And more than half of this is the re-roofing.
And but you're going to complete it in the fall, which you're going to start it when?
It's going to be during its shutdown. We're not going to start till the pool, the outdoor
Okay, so
pool
after
closes.
September.
After it closes, yeah.
Okay. And the ones that are near their end of their service life, what is the time frame for the decisions on these buildings, like Scout Hall, for example? If I had $360,000, I'd build a new Scout Hall, or the HVAC. And I don't know what elements to ensure the safety and I don't know what wording you used. It troubles me that I don't know what the time frame is for these decisions.
Okay, well, if we're talking about the 2016 facilities upgrade, this is what our program is spitting out. We will be coming towards to you asking for facilities upgrade funds. Before we ask you for the 2016 budget, we will be assessing them and giving you alternates to, as an example, Skull Hill. Either we bring it up or we do something else with it. This is a high level the numbers that are coming out of our VFA program. We don't actually just go ahead and do them, we assess them. This is an information update to you that we're going to be coming in 2016 with a request in 2017. With each of these requests, we will have options or alternatives. This 360 is just a program number. If we were going to maintain it.
And that would happen, through the chair, that would happen after we've had discussions with our client.
That's correct.
Which in this case for Scout Hall is Park, Recs, and Culture. So it's our client that has a vested interest in how Scout Hall continues, in what format, whether it gets demolished, whether it doesn't, whether we rebuild the whole thing, whether it gets replaced somewhere else. Those are all discussions that we have to have with our client. We cannot, it's beyond our mandate in SI to make these decisions alone. The decision's made by council, but we're talking about what comes to council is through extensive dialogue and discussion with our, in this case, it's with our client. With respect to fire halls, it would be with the fire chief and his staff and so on and so on. So,
okay, so the decisions are made by council, and yet I look back on page 4, the Poirier Administration Building. When did we make the decision to do that work? I don't remember.
No, the request was put out to council as part of our $3 million in funding. We identified at the time 6 or 8 high-level projects that we were going to complete as part of $3 million. I believe that Poirier Admin Building was in the list. I can't remember whether we gave the top 5 or top 8 within our request at that time. But it was part of the 2015 funding request.
Okay. Okay. I'll leave it at that because I'm going to have to go back and look at my documents to figure out where.
Okay, Brent and Terry.
Well, just, when I look at this report, and we need to know the dates of all these buildings, when they were built, so it gives a better response to what you're looking at, just not the fire hall, but every building. When you bring a report, you should be able to tell us the date it was built, the life expectancy, and to May's point, if this building is why, right? Why is it not meeting that life expectancy? The other question comes down to like the town center fire hall portable building. My question was $125K, and I went, what's the cost of a new portable building in there versus this cost here? But that's not within it. So those type of issues I think would be better within these reports to let us know. And I guess the other thing would be some information within this from the other departments, case Scout Hall. And I think our question to us is that we're going, well, when are we replacing it? Is it going to be 5 years, 10 years? Do we spend the $360 now? If we're going to do it in 3 years, are we wasting $360,000? So I think we need to know from these reports, in your conversations with the other departments, what are their plans on the life expectancy or replacement of these things before you come to us and say, we're going to do this. We need to know, that needs to be better fleshed out in this report. It needs to be better understood because it makes it difficult for me to really understand these issues. Thank you.
Terry, then Dennis.
Yeah, good points from Councillor Asmussen there in terms of the dates. I was spent this time trying to find out online, if I could, when the Town Centre Fire Hall was built originally. But I found a document about the extension, the addition to it that was completed in 2010, cost just under $5 million. And that said, in that description by the contractor, it said that some things were a little cheaper generally, so they were working with the city. They were able to actually expand the stuff that they could do with that project, and that included an upgrade of the entire mechanical system in the existing facility, all within the original budget. So I'm thinking, okay, so the entire mechanical system in the existing building was updated in 2010. So what could possibly be wrong now? Are we talking about a roof? Are we talking about structural supports? What could possibly be wrong with the Town Centre Fire Hall that it's now in this dire position? If the entire mechanical system was upgraded in 2010, what could possibly be wrong? You've got to have some sort of indication. Please, maybe the chief could tell us. What's wrong? Are bats in the belfry, or are the bats in the belfry metaphorically on this one?
Through the chair. First of all, I believe the hall was built in 1989. I believe it was Austin went first, 1987. Then Town Centre was 1989. And then it was renovated quite correctly in 2010. I think some of the problems we're seeing in Town Centre Fire Hall are usual with times when you reno. There's a blend of different mechanical systems that were in place at the time. We're experiencing some differences in heating and air conditioning capabilities, things like that at times. The most recent that we've asked facilities to look at is our overhead doors. They go up and down a lot. They're not standing up. They would be what I would call a consumable. I don't think we expect those to last 50 years. Fire hall garage doors or overhead doors are of a differing type than most. They're heavy commercial, of course, but they also have to go up in a certain amount of time that requires them to have a larger motor and gear drives than any other type of system, and they're fairly rare out there, and they have to be also coordinated with our apparatus so we can open them and close them from behind as well. So there's many systems that go with them. We have also, thank you to the taxpayer and council, we have a ladder truck that sits in there. And unfortunately, when the hall was built, it wasn't built in one bay to accommodate that ladder truck, so it's low. So we're hoping to maybe have some remedial work so the ladder truck can occupy all of the bays if possible in that hall. So those are just some of the little things that happen. I wouldn't say that you have an inferior fire hall there, quite to the contrary. You have an excellent fire hall there, but there's also some resealing of the outside brick, things like that happens. It's just due maintenance.
So an excellent fire hall that might need new doors, might need some resealing of the exterior brickwork and things like that, which is kind of regular maintenance. I've had 3 garage doors on my house where the engines broke. Doesn't mean I need to replace my whole house, which was built in 1979. So I don't know why then the town center fire hall would be in this category where it is getting close to its economic life cycle and may require demolition or replacement. From what you've said, that's not the case. It might need some upgrading, might need some new mechanicals in there. But from the way you look at it, we shouldn't be too worried about it at this stage.
Through the chair, just on the surface, if the fire hall was built in '89, there would be no need to have that fire hall at the end of its economic life today or tomorrow or in 5 years.
You go 10?
Sure, let's go 10.
Okay.
You know,
put on your auction.
Unless there was really some extenuating circumstances that I'm not aware of,
all right.
I can't see why it would need it's reaching the end of its economic life.
All right, so let's strike that off this as well as the town center fire hall portable structure, which we did replace. Okay, already approved for replacement. Okay, thank you.
So I'm just going to go Dennis next.
I appreciate the second chance through here. Just quickly thinking back, we saw earlier a basically 15-year prioritization plan from our Parks and Rec department with regards to parks needs. Would it be appropriate to suggest that the work that's been done here is perhaps a first step towards building something like that for all our buildings and all our facilities, where we could look and at some point in the future you might bring back to us saying, okay, here's the 80 buildings that we've got, or 80, whatever the number happens to be, and here's their construction date and that. Is it realistic that we could ask of something like that to help us with long-term financial planning in terms of capital replacement?
Through the chair, that's exactly what we are starting to do in developing this data, which has historically not come to council in any detailed manner.
Yeah.
I thought that it would be appropriate as a first step to get this information introduced to council, and as a first step in the infancy stage to, over time, give council a complete picture of all of the assets.
And I really appreciate that, because we've heard from our city manager about, there's a lot of needs.
Right.
There's a lot of needs, and I think it's important that as a council we see exactly what that is, and the more you can do to give us that, to say here's where it is, the better we can look at long-term planning.
Right.
And the better we can make the decisions in terms of what we need to do to help drive the economic piece in our city, but also make sure we're managing the taxes.
Right.
So I think, again, I was surprised to see a couple on here.
Yeah.
I think once you get the full package and show all the buildings and where they're at, we might be surprised to see some others. But I think it's a surprise we need to have so we can best manage for the future. So I hope you don't feel I beat you up on this, but I appreciate the information.
I appreciate the comments.
I'm just going to wrap this up. I think that an excellent discussion. I think it's brought awareness to us and to people like me of some of the issues that we're facing down the road. Like some of our reports, they often lead to more questions.
Yeah.
And I think that we'd like to get some more answers. So I think we have two options. One is, and I appreciate Dennis's suggestion about seeing that bigger sort of matrix and where things are. And I think that's a lot of work and something I think would be valuable to eventually accomplish. But I think in terms of this report, we have two options. One, I guess we could defer it, or we could pass as is and request some extra information. I'll just see to the clerk, what's our our best, because I think we dates, and there's some information that we would like, and I don't know if we should just come back with some of that information added.
I guess the choice would be whether the changes are such a substantive nature that you want the original report back with something in addition, or whether a new report that encapsulates and covers some of the information requests would be better. And the answer I would give is, if it's the former, you can defer and request that it come back, or if it's the latter, accept and direct staff to prepare a report that would respond to the questions raised.
I would say the latter.
And that's what I was hearing as well.
Okay, Brent,
I'll second that.
Second by Dennis.
So,
Defer for further, sorry, what was the?
you've received this report with direction to staff to prepare a subsequent report.
Follow information. Benita.
I just wanted to make a statement really quickly that I didn't interpret any of this report as being that these buildings need to come down or whatever. I mean, I interpreted it as we have some maintenance issues, like we need some new bathrooms at City Hall and stuff. So I just wanted to put it out there. Yes, it's all going to come back, but I just want you both know I appreciated this because what it highlighted to me is we haven't done proper maintenance over the years, and I think 25 years for a bathroom is appropriate. We should be renovating the bathroom.
Okay.
So it's been moved and seconded to receive.
To receive. All in favor? Any opposed? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. Good. Thanks. Good discussion.
Mr. Chair, we have almost 5:30. Of the remaining reports, Report 11 and Report 13 have statutory requirements to be approved sooner rather than later. The other reports are able to be deferred to the next meeting, but certainly 11 and 13 should happen now.
Okay. Do we need a motion? Can we just go straight to move 11?
Yep.
Okay, second. Second by Benita. Or sorry, Terry. Tanner. Okay. Just a second. I'm just flipping pages here. Watching.
So just for the people who are watching, Report 11 is the 2014 Annual Development Cost Charges Report. Staff recommendation is that's before you for information as reported to the General Manager of Financial Services. It has been moved by Councilor Reid.
Okay. Any questions?
I did have a quick one. I didn't understand fully why the DCCs were driving down with all of the growth. I didn't understand that.
You know, it's generally a timing thing. DCCs come in at particular times when the development permit the building permit is issued, or when we do subdivision. So sometimes your DCCs go up and down at different times than you would expect.
Which it says in the report, but can we not anticipate? Like, do we not know what's coming in?
I think actually our building permit numbers are a bit down at the moment. So it actually ties in expectedly. Yeah.
Because it was, the majority of our residents think that we've got a lot of growth going on in this city.
Well, we do, but it might already be permitted, and there's just a timing thing. Apparently, there are a number of big ones that are going to come in for Coquitlam, but they just haven't come through yet because it's the timing of when they go through the process.
Any further questions? Okay.
On the last point, typically when you perceive that there's a lot of growth going, that meant that last year DCCs went up.
Yeah.
It's not
And
necessarily
2013 was a banner year, like way above
We're seeing
usual.
that now.
Yeah.
Good. It's been moved, seconded. All in favor? Any opposed? That's carried.
Thank you. Moving on to item 13 at this time. This is a report of the General Manager of Financial Services. It's the 2014 Statement of Financial Information. It's before you for information.
So moved. Moved by Councilor Atkinson, seconded by Mayor Stewart. Any discussion? Okay. Councilor O'Neill.
Question. It was about the reserve fund balances, page 31. Bonus density, city center, amenities. Am I on the right one?
Community work.
Yep.
Number 13?
Yep.
Yep, on 13.
Yep.
13, not 12. Okay.
31.
And so there's a whole bunch of money there. Is this the money for the Lincoln Station? And, that's $11 million there. Is that for Lincoln Station? Is that about $11 million?
No, the Lincoln Station was actually paid for in a partnership. It's been accrued. It's been in a partnership with Morgard, and we've got a P3 Canada grant for it, as well as some land transfers. Is how we paid for that.
We were originally going to use bonus density, but because we got $7 million from the federal government on an innovative partnership thing, we didn't need to use it, so it's available for other projects in the future. Not yet allocated.
Good, okay. Okay, thanks. I forgot about that.
Councilor Wilson?
Page 33, the schedule of debt. First few are with CP Rail, Como Creek Culvert, 7.2%. Is this money that we owe to ourselves or to an outside body?
No, this is external debt that we took for local improvements. It's actually then owed to us from the properties that took place, that voted in the local improvement at the time.
So we're not paying that interest rate, but the owners are paying that interest rate?
The owners are most paying it. Well, it was a shared thing at the time, so we're paying a little bit of it, but they're mostly paying it. So we collect local improvement taxes for a 20-year period after the debt goes through, and so this is matched to the revenue coming in from the residents that voted for the improvement. And at the time, we charged 8%, and we ended up getting the debt at 7.2. So it worked out kind of okay.
And that's the same for all these local improvement items?
Yep. They're set at the time and the interest rate at the time, and then the parties that are involved pay us that interest rate.
I remember it from last year, too.
Most of them are retiring. The really high ones are retiring fairly soon.
Good. Councilor Marston?
Very quickly, so on that same topic, again, are those sinking fund debt as well?
Yep.
Is that, okay. So on page 28, our sinking fund debt dropped. The sinking fund surplus dropped significantly from 222 to just under 8,000. Is that related to the retirement of some of the debts we did in the previous calendar year?
Sorry, where are you?
Schedule D, page 28.
28, Schedule D. Yeah, what are you looking at? Sinking fund
Sinking
surplus?
fund surpluses.
Oh, yeah, we had quite a big payout in 2013.
Okay, so that's related to...
Yes, but we didn't have similar this year. Those things come at particular times. When they decide to retire a debt, you might have a payout, you might not. It just depends on where you're at and which ones are retiring.
Okay, so...
Each one of those is a different issue, and so each one of them will have sort of a different time frame that they deal with. So every now and again, we'll get a great big sinking fund payout, which we did in, actually, it was quite a bit more. You're looking at just the water utility, but if you actually look at the consolidated statement, it was quite big. It was a couple $1 million.
Exactly.
And there was also an increase to our interest in that particular year.
Okay. All right, thank you. Yep. And every year, or every 3 years, it seems, we end up with a question from a council member. We had a question from a council member related to the schedule of payments, which is a statutory, the Financial Information Act statutory reporting. And I recognize, and every year we say this, that the Act requires us to report it in a way that misleads everybody, and it actually lies. The schedule of payment made for the provision of goods and services, and then you go down to a law firm, and the payment that we made wasn't for the goods and services to the law firm. It was in trust for something else.
For land.
And is there any way that we could asterisk or some other way to explain that we're not cutting Bullhauser Tupper a check for land, we're cutting someone else a check and paying it through Bullhauser Tupper in the same way that if we pay a Visa, otherwise we could put Visa as goods and services, but it isn't Visa, we're actually making the payment to someone else.
We could do that. It's that particular line, you're looking at the $17 million number, it is a mix of things, because some of that we have paid them for legal services. Most of it, of course, is land deals. So yes, we can put a little asterisk and put, this includes land transactions.
Land transaction or land transaction paid in trust or something.
Interest, for sure.
So that would, and it's a perfectly legitimate question when it comes up, because it makes us look very litigious.
This is moved.
It's been moved and seconded. Yes.
Seconded. Okay, all in favor? Any opposed? This item is carried. Okay.
It's all very clear.
Mr. Chair, we have OBs, or we have item 12. 14 might take longer, I don't know, but I leave it up to the
Let's just go to the OBs.
Let's go to the OBs. OB item 1 has been raised by Councillor Serv.
Right, sorry.
Sorry. Good job, and the concern's accessible sidewalks.
Yes, thinking ahead because I see there's some.
So I think I better start by recognizing that Mr. Tabora said sat in the audience today for 3.5 hours. Thank you very much. He brought forward some concerns about some of our sidewalks, and I wanted to just share with council before we get into the sidewalks, why I wanted to bring this forward. Soon after I was elected, another resident that's in a wheelchair phoned me, and she was very, very distraught about her journey to the RCMP building this day. And she had a passionate speech to me about how difficult it was for her to park and to navigate her way up some ramps to get into the RCMP building. And when she got into the RCMP building, she got herself into the bathroom, but she couldn't get herself out of the bathroom. And just the loss of dignity from the whole experience had her just done. She just said, it's 2014, we really need to fix this. So when I saw the emails about some of the challenges that you were having on the Newport sidewalk, it just reminded me that we really need to maybe take some steps back and we just get the basic needs set out there, that so any member of the community can easily go outside and go to, use the washrooms. So that being said, Mr. Mooney has been working hard on this, and I thought we could have a discussion today just about where the city's at in regards to our sidewalks, just basically the accessibility of our sidewalks for people with limited mobility and people in chairs, and maybe some suggestions on how we can go forward. But I think the concern basically was there's brand new sidewalk forward in the city center, and it's maybe not, what do you call that? Not terrainable, but not manageable by people in chairs. So So I did want to recognize that Mr. Mooney has been working hard on this.
Okay.
He's committed to it, and I'd like to have an open discussion.
Okay. Brent?
Well, thank you for raising it.
I'm sorry, I had Richard. Sorry, started different. Richard, then Brent. Sorry.
Yeah, and I want to thank the resident for coming forward as well. I had actually raised this question with Mr. Mooney and with a couple of members of the engineering staff a couple of months before you pointed it out, because I discovered that as I was walking down the road that a section of sidewalk had been changed, or was not to our standard. It was actually the standard of the building next to it, and was clearly installed by the same contractor that did their driveway. And Mr. Mooney at the time made the comment, and I was really, it was the right comment, that we need to make sure that sidewalks interrupt driveways, not that driveways interrupt sidewalks, so that pedestrians are on a city sidewalk all the way through their path, not that at some point they have to cross over a driveway. The driveway in particular is on Pacific, just north of Glen, and it's stamped concrete. It's been recently sealed, and it's shiny, and it's probably, I don't know, did you get a % grade out of it? I was going to do the % grade, but I never got around to it. But it's a good slope. And so you're laterally in a chair. You're going across it sideways. It's not the kind of position you'd want to be in a chair. And I was walking at the time on a somewhat damp day, and I felt uncomfortable with its slipperiness because I have an issue with my back, and so I thank you for raising it. It is. I'm actually quite confident that our standard for sidewalks is really quite good. It's whether or not whether someone has done something, in this case a landowner has done something on civic property in front of their building to try to make it look more attractive from their perspective, so that their driveway now starts at the curb and goes straight up, and it's all poured concrete or stamped concrete, sealed and stuff, and becomes quite slippery. And I don't know what, the solution, I think, is going to be ripping that up and putting a sidewalk down. Mr. Mooney, did you determine the age of I know we had a long discussion a couple months ago and another discussion about 3 weeks ago. How old is
Mr. Mooney? Please.
Through the chair, Your Worship, we believe that sidewalk was in fact stamped at the time that the original building was built, but clearly it has been resurfaced, resealed, colored, and it stands out quite dramatically now, and I think it has changed the walkability of that. I think also our standards for sidewalk construction within the city have evolved over time through best practices and recognizing an aging population and more mobility needs in our community. And so I think we've got a number of situations, as good as our standards are, we've got a number of situations where we've got legacies that were created years ago that we need to address. We are meeting with Martin tomorrow, myself, Carl Johansson, who's here as well, Mark Zaborniak, and Catherine Mahoric, to share with him some of our best practices that we've got, get some of his best practices that he's done research on, and his own personal experiences, which are invaluable in terms of identifying specific situations that appear acceptable or normal to us. We're very enlightened by his experiences. So that meeting will be occurring tomorrow, and we'll have a sharing of knowledge. But I think there is a need to continually revisit our standards and right down through to whether it's our subdivision development control regulations, our master municipal specifications, or our area plans and neighborhood plans and streetscape design guidelines that were developed in the past to make sure that they are, in fact, consistent with that new approach and philosophy that we have.
And my last point would be, and it's not just deference. It's not just in chairs. Obviously, it's not so bad lately. The last couple of years have been really good, but I have a leg that drags occasionally from sciatica, and I can trip on a quarter-inch. And for a whole bunch of our residents in the downtown core, that mess of pavers that Councillor Asmundson would scream at, that mess of paving stones that doesn't do what it's. We've got some work to do. Posting notices saying, "Watch out, your life's in danger," isn't the answer. I think long term, we obviously have to make those improvements to get our sidewalks up to the standard we want them to be today. So thank you very much.
Hanson. Just to know, further what Dan had said, that based on the feedback we received and noting that the guidelines need to be modified, we're working with the developer to modify the completion of the frontage to incorporate that smooth saw cut finish into the movement zone, but maintain some of the character and landscape strip. So those are some of the approaches that we're going to be looking at considering, but of course we'll be meeting with one and we'll be bringing stuff forward.
So sorry, the control joints would be saw cut instead of tools. Okay. I'd actually like to see us, and it's good that the Disability Issues Advisory Committee I think is the right place to make sure that we really continue to push. We were a leader. We need to continue to be a leader in accessibility, particularly on the sidewalks, the crosswalks. The crosswalks are a big issue, etc. Right.
Well, I'm just on this issue, and thank you for raising the issue. When I was chair of the Universal Accessibility Committee 2 years ago, the issue was the smoothness of sidewalks. And we had discussions in council, and I felt there was direction through to staff that sidewalks from the Universal Accessibility, and I talked about it on a few developments through Mr. McIntyre when it came through, that the sidewalks were to be a smooth surface with, rather than trowel joints, saw cut joints. The letdowns were to be saw cut joints, not trowel joints. And that was about 2 years ago that we pushed, and I thought those had been adapted standards. But what I understand, I don't think that those are official adapted standards at this time. And are we doing a review of the standards to incorporate all our standards so that will be the standard? That's my question to you. Because I was under the impression it was already.
Yeah, we're bringing that forward with my Artville streetscaping guidelines. The Pine Tree Way standard has that smoother approach, and like I said, we're looking to modify completion of the frontage to have that smoother movement zone, and we'd like to bring that forward as an update to the guidelines.
For the whole city?
In the areas that we have those, the streetscaping guidelines, yeah. Because I think that we have that smooth.
Because I think for sidewalks throughout all the city, if you get that smooth surface, that design for mobility, and this came up 2 years ago, and we were just through to Benita, this was an issue that we raised at council, raised through the reports from the Universal Accessibility Committee, raised with Mr. McIntyre as some developments came up with sidewalks around them, making sure that they were going to be smooth. We said you can do some designs on the edges of the sidewalks, but the travel portion for people, it's just not wheelchairs, it's people with walkers, people with canes, people who have other issues that are more susceptible to tripping, whether it's a bad back or whatever. So I would just like to encourage you to get those standards in place as soon as possible throughout the city for these sidewalks. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Benita and then Chris.
So this will go back to the University Accessibility Committee. I'm sure that we'll be working on it, and I just want to let council know we'll be bringing something forward, but enforcement is something that we're going to have to think about, because we can make all the rules in the world, but as the mayor pointed out, if these things, if the developers go ahead and do stuff. So I just want the council to know this will definitely be coming back. I don't know in what form, but we need to get on it quickly. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris.
I just wanted to confirm, because maybe I missed it. The surface that we're talking about outside the Evergreen Tower at the corner of Glen and Pine Tree, that's built to our acceptable standard now, or it's not? It was done against our standard?
It was designed according to the city center streetscaping guidelines.
So at the time we did that, we encouraged stamped concrete.
Now we're seeking to modify that.
So in this particular case now, we've just had to lean on the developer to modify it because what they did was within our
That's correct. But we have already been working with the developer at the remaining frontage, and they're amenable to that. And it's a practical, straightforward design.
And how difficult is it to now change our guidelines for all the other development that's happening in this area?
Well, I think it's like it's been said, that we would go back and work on this, come up with proposals, bring them through the Universal Accessibility Committee, and bring it forward to council for adoption, much like with the Myardville streetscaping approach.
And is there any other development close to the stage where they will be pouring sidewalks in the town center area, or areas where we have concerns that we might be able to catch it before it gets done?
There might be one or two, but I think that we would be preparing for the next phase of downtown development, and that's sort of what we're keeping in mind is what kind of standard do we want to bring forward that doesn't is obviously universally accessible, but doesn't depart from the character that we've been trying to, put in place throughout the city center.
Just as long as the same, thing doesn't happen, right? Right. Are you confident that you'll be able to prevent that from happening again? Then is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Well, I'm not trying to chastise you.
No, I'm fully aware of it.
Good. Any other comments, questions? Thank you very much, and thank you for being with us for the afternoon for this important item. Thank you, Mr. Clerk.
The second OB concerns Canada Post hours raised by Councillor Asmundson.
Yeah, it's just strictly what's happened in our neighborhood is one box got broken into. People were given a notice just on thing to go and pick up their mail which is industrial and port equipment in our area, from 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. The problem is how many people for a month, for 4 to 6 weeks, to go down there, how many people work and can't make those hours, can't pick up their mail. So my wish would be and then we had our super mailboxes all replaced. And then there was wasn't even notified, then there was all of them replaced. I came back to the retreat, got new mailboxes. Our existing keys don't work. Well, you got to go down to Industrial Lounge between 9 and 5 and get your new keys for it. So what I'd like council to do is request that Canada Post extend their hours during the week so people can actually, because they're actually doing all of the new boxes, they'll be going through all the areas of the city, replacing the old boxes, doing changeovers, that they extend their hours either to 7 p.m. Monday to Friday or open up on a Saturday so people have easier access to get their mail. And it's just an issue that a lot of people relate to me, and I think it would be helpful if we could send a letter from council to Canada Post asking them to extend their hours when they're doing these changeovers or when there's a theft in it. Because when the theft happened, they said, we're going to do an investigation. It'll take 4 to 6 weeks. And then they said, yeah, the investigation, we're going to replace your mailboxes. Then one day they were gone and new ones were in. It's just very difficult for most hard-working people to pick up their mail between 9 and 5, Monday to Friday.
Myself and then Richard. I got to. I've gone through the break-in and having to go down, so I've been through that. But when I got my new box, the key arrived 2 weeks ahead of time, and it was just a key in my box that says you're going to get a new box in 3 weeks. Here's your key. So they've changed that now, where they tell you go down and get the keys, so they don't leave the keys in the boxes anymore in advance, because that would be easier than staying open later. Maybe to the point that we should ask why they no longer do that.
But even if staying later to get your mail, okay, that's the key's one thing, but to get your mail.
But ours was operational right up until the day they changed it.
But there's these people who are thefts. When
there's a theft, they shut the box down.
Yeah, and you go 9 to 5, right?
Yeah, it's important.
Richard, I'm going to suggest very quickly that if there's no disagreement, let's have
it's a simple thing.
Have that drafted up and sent as a request to find a solution for the longer term, longer hours, to allow our residents that in the event of a break-in to get their mail in the short term, get their new key when that process ends, and we can even
no objection. Yeah, I'm just challenged by saying it has to be the longer hours at that location. I would think that we need to encourage them to create a solution that works.
Well, no, at all locations.
For us to superimpose a solution on them that may not be the best, there may be other alternatives. I think if you were to say to create a solution to address the issues that arise through replacement or theft, then I would support that.
They're all good? That's good.
We'll do. Good.
Thank you.
We'll characterize that as direction.
Okay, good. Mr. Clerk.
Third OB concerns a letter from Glen Pine, was raised by Councillor O'Neill.
Yes, the Glen Pine 50 Plus Society recently sent us a letter asking for the installation of a new pickup and drop-off location directly north of the Bosa construction site. Also asking for council to consider changing the street address for Glen Pine because nobody can find 1200 Glen Pine Court. And so those are two issues that I've experienced over the years myself. And I understand that since this letter was written, that the representative from Glen Pine has met with city officials and toured, and that there's some response that we perhaps share right now.
Yes, we did meet with the individual, actually, along with our own supervisory staff. We walked through the area. There's a number of issues that they've expressed. Historically, they have some issues with parking and parking enforcement in their facility. We've helped them a little bit with that, but they are challenged in a couple of areas, primarily related to access to their facility. The Glen Pine Court, I guess it is in the back, is currently there's lots of construction issues relating to the building of the latest phase of BOSA. However, their long-term access and drop-off for buses in particular, the large buses, those buses are really not able to get in through the back very well, so they end up using Burlington. And Burlington is a two-lane road at that point, so it does pinch. So we talked about some of the potential options we might look at. So they have a number of access issues. They do have the smaller buses that come in and out, and they actually can use the back. There is a loading bay there. However, that cul-de-sac is small, and it actually often has garbage locations in there, temporary moved in and out to serve the number of stratas and the facility. For larger buses, it is something we need to look at, and we have met on site, and we're working with our representatives, also as strategic initiatives that would help us work with the Glen Pine Society to find out the best approach. So we are looking to accommodate their request as best as we can. We're still in the exploratory phase, but we are conscious that the access has to be resolved. It would include a number of operational things. We have to work with those stratas in the back to better manage the Glen Pine Court, or I can't remember the road, that court that comes in the back. That has to be better managed. That's what's important. Signage. The current address it does say Glen Pine on the top, but the address is actually on the glass. We think we should put actual numbers on the building. That would help that stand out. So there's a number of things we're looking at, but we are going to be working with the society.
Now, this isn't specifically Parks, Rec, and Culture, but I've noticed many times on Burlington there are trucks, delivery trucks of all sorts parked there, pinching it down to one lane. I think long-term, looking ahead, we've got to find some sort of way to have some sort of access in there for drop-off, for trucks. I think food service trucks delivering. Some of them are quite big. Even when we, had fire trucks here in the area for public displays, and they're sitting on that street. And it's,
One of the options is actually how to build, whether we could actually build a bay, something in there to actually offer the loading and then provide the access to Glen Pine patrons. So we are looking at that option as one of several options.
Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you. Just a question. I mean, we hear this constantly about the parking and the lack of parking in the area, and I'm just wondering, and maybe somebody can tell us, we keep talking about parking strategies for the town center area, and I assume that this would be addressed as part of that, or some options in the future, because clearly, we built the center. There's not enough parking, particularly in the area. I think for some of for disabled parking, And so it's really challenging for parking in that area. And I'm sort of looking at some point we've got to come up with some other options and look at some things. It's certainly not a discussion we have time to have today or have the facts before us, but I think that something needs to be done. And at what point do you think we can address it? Through a parking strategy or looking for spots?
Well, we're if I can through the chair, we're separating it from the larger strategy, this town center parking strategy, but it is a business plan priority, is addressing parking in the pavilions, so it is something we're looking at right now. And it was not raised in the letter, but we are working with Glen Pine to find alternate opportunities.
Okay, thank you. Richard, thanks.
Yeah, at some point we, that doesn't relate specifically to the drop-off point, but at some point back in the days of pre-Spirit Square, we talked about the possibility of raising Burlington for that, the 6 inches for that stretch between in front of Spirit Square, and allowing bollards instead of a curb, and therefore positioning the bollards such that you'd have potential for, and that allowed the Spirit Square to be extended almost across into Buchanan Square, and it also meant that people realized that they were in a pedestrian area because there's so many people, myself included, find a different path that's more convenient than the crosswalk. So I think there's a long-term solution, and it's not going to be decided tonight. There's also other potential for trying to figure out a solution that includes the 0.39 acre, but that's not for an open meeting, but we've got work to do. We thank you for your responsiveness on the on the issues that came up the other night.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Finally, the last OB item is OB 4, which concerns Charles Best Field, I believe. It's raised by Councillor Towner.
Okay, this was just brought up because I sent an email out to council and RCMP Superintendent Maloney right before the meeting today, and I'll just quickly brief you on it. What had happened is, excuse me, yesterday my daughter had a soccer game at the Charles Best turf, and everybody arrived. I wasn't there because I was at the Teddy Bears picnic, and at the north end of the bleachers, right next to the turf, the sidewalk area, there was at least 24. Like a couple of cases of Corona glass beer bottles, and they were all smashed. And so there was glass everywhere, all through the bleachers, the sidewalk, and on the turf. So my husband went home, got the brooms, and they cleaned it up as best they could while the girls were warming up, because there was lots of glass on the turf, which is a safety issue. And it was just such a mess that I felt compelled to email our RCMP just asking if that is a known party area, if they kind of keep an eye on it. And he wrote me back that he will add Dr. Charles Best parking lot to the watch commanders to add to their patrol list. So I didn't know if this was new, but it wasn't just one bottle. It was when I got there at about halftime, the pile of glass that they swept up was absolutely obscene. So a safety issue. So I just wanted to bring it to their attention because I didn't know if that was a known party area. I've heard that it potentially is.
I haven't heard. I would say council's aware this is a turf replacement project for this summer. So if there's any security things we can actually add to our scope of work, if we need to, we'll look at that. I had not been aware of that, but we'll talk to the RCMP as well. We'll talk to the principal, and we'll find out if there's anything that we can do from a design. If there's any gaps in the fencing and whatever, we'll see what we can do. But I appreciate it being brought to our attention.
If it was one bottle, we might not have said anything. We would have just cleaned it up, but it was over the top. So,
thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe it's probably most appropriate to adjourn at this time. And,
Second.
Moved by everybody, second by Fred. All in favor? Any opposed? Meeting adjourned.
Thank you all.